Well, good morning, everyone. May I have your attention, please? Thank you so much. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Chamber of Commerce Southern New Jersey's Cannabis Workshop. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Christina Renna, and I am President and CEO of the Chamber. Thank you so much for joining us. Some of you in this room were here last February when we did our first workshop, which was extraordinarily successful. And we are happy to repeat it today with very high-level panel discussions, talking about really every hot topic you can imagine. So today's program was formatted kind of intentionally in 3 different phases, and we certainly hope you can stay with us until the very end. But our first panel is going to be focused on local. We have 3 mayors that have embraced the industry, are going to talk about their journey, some of the challenges they've hit along the way, and next steps. Second panel is really going to be talking at a state level with 2 leaders in cannabis about state regulatory issues, legislative issues. And then the third panel is really going to touch on some of these larger scale federal issues that are impacting how you all can do business in the state. It was designed this way intentionally, and we hope you get a lot out of it today. So again, thank you so much for being here. But before we jump into the conversation, allow me to begin by thanking our 3 sponsors of today's program, starting with Archer & Greiner PC, who is represented today by the gentleman who is basically our master of ceremonies today, William J. Caruso, who is partner at Archer & Greiner. He is the lead of the cannabis law group there, and he is my go-to, and many of you in this room's go-to source for all things cannabis. And so thank you very much, Bill, for being here. Burton Trent Public Affairs, represented by Michael Turner and Scott Rutter, both partners, and Scott is going to be joining us on that third panel, diving into those federal issues. And last but not least, we have Witham, and we have Kevin McGlunn, who is here. We also have a few other Witham reps here, so thank you all so much. It is your corporate support that allows us to be able to put on this programming. Everyone, please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors. We do have several elected officials in this room at a local level, at a county level. I did not list them because I would only get myself in trouble by missing some. So if you are an elected official, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for being here and joining us today. But before I jump in, I need to give all of the kudos, all of the love, and all of the shout outs to Bill Caruso. And I say that because he really drives our programming as it relates to cannabis at the Chamber, because he's the expert. I'm not an expert. I learn so much from him every conversation I have. If you are in cannabis and don't know Bill Caruso, you need to know Bill Caruso, and that is going to shine thoroughly as he runs us through today's extremely important conversations. But I am just so thankful, Bill, for all of your help, because I'm a pain. I'm a real pain in the butt sometimes, and he just embraces it and runs with it. So thank you very much, Bill. So a few housekeeping items before we jump into today's program. In a moment, I am going to turn the floor over to Bill, and he's going to moderate our first panel with our mayors today. And as I mentioned, the design of this program is 3 parts. So in between each panel, we're going to take a very quick, 5-minute break just to switch out our panelists, jump right back into the program. All 3 panels are designed the exact same way. If you hear something up here that you have a question about, or you'd like to follow up, or maybe they didn't dive deep enough, or you have something you want to touch on, hold that question. Once we get through all the presentations, we will open it up to Q&A with the audience. Bill will ask you to raise your hands, and then our team will come around with microphones, and you can answer any questions at that, or ask any questions at that point. We are hoping to conclude by 11:45 today, maybe even a little bit earlier if all goes well. We love early. We will definitely not be any later than 11:45 a.m. this morning. So as far as timeline goes, that is your timeline. That is the lay of the land for today's program. And I just want to also very quickly mention in the back, we have some amazing vendors, folks that if you haven't had a chance to spend some time with, please do visit them, if you didn't at the beginning, in these breaks that we've built in. So with that, I'm now going to almost shut up, but I can't shut up unless I introduce Bill Caruso. Please note that all the biographies were sent in advance to you in the confirmation email, so we did try to keep the biographies short today. So in very short, Bill is a cannabis policy expert and one of the most respected voices in New Jersey's cannabis debate. He has spent the past 15 years reforming New Jersey's marijuana laws from medical to decriminalization and legalization. As chair of Archer Law's Cannabis and Government Affairs Practices, Bill represents the New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform and is a New Jersey Cannabis Association board member. He's also my friend, and I'm very lucky to call him that. So with that, please join me in welcoming Bill Caruso.
Good morning, folks. Thanks for being here, and for those of you that have been here throughout this continuing experiment, thanks for continuing to be advocates and help move this ball forward. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't thank our host and our guest, who's way too kind in our work here together, and we are friends. But friends sometimes have disagreements on policy items and find ways to work together, and I'm going to tell you this. Christina Renna was not a huge fan of this effort when we first started, not because she thought it was a bad idea, but because she's a fantastic advocate for business. She is an authentic person. She's always been an authentic person, and she serves the community that she works for. And so what I loved about Christina, and what I've always loved about this organization, I grew up here professionally. I grew up here as a democratic policy person that learned the important interplay between business and government. And I was taught well by being a part of this group. But Christina dug in on behalf of business to ensure that when we did this experiment, it succeeded. She didn't use her voice to block it. She used her voice and her advocacy to make this better. And I can't thank you enough for your advocacy on behalf of the entire industry and business community, because we are starting to realize that interplay. I look at your sponsors and your vendors in the back. Normal businesses coming together with normal cannabis businesses now and serving as a larger industry for New Jersey to benefit new taxpayers, new jobs, new revenue, and we're going to hear about a lot of that. That happened because of fantastic advocacy from the business community, and that's what this organization does. So a round of applause for our host today. So I turned 50 this year, last month. I'm still a very young man, but I realized that the 18-year-old, I'm raising one right now, would have thought that me being a cannabis policy expert was really cool. But it's been an amazing journey, and we're still on it. You're going to hear a lot about that today. But I'm really privileged to be here today with 3 local pioneers. One of the biggest impediments right now to the explosion of growth that we're starting to see here in New Jersey is approvals at the local level. It's a little convoluted. It's not necessarily the fault of local government, by the way. There's also still feelings about this right now that local mayors and local council elected and local panels that have been established have to deal with. And by the way, these folks deal with it in the supermarket. They deal with it when they're out shopping and getting their dry cleaning every day. Other elected officials, not so much. These folks here every single day. But nevertheless, there are big successes going on in these 3 towns. 3 different towns, 3 different counties in our region. 3 different mayors representing different ways of approaching this, all seeing similar successes right now. So I think it's exciting to hear from them now as an update of what we're hearing at the local level. So I will tell you we're going to do 3 different discussions with these mayors. We'll open it up, as Christina said, to audience for questions when they're done. I wanted to first introduce our first speaker of the day, Mayor Paul Medani, the mayor of Deptford, our host for today. Host gets to go first, by the way. I'm sorry, Dave and Jackie. But Mayor Medani's been a pioneer here in different ways. And his relationship to this experiment, both as a local government leader, a labor leader, a community leader, and a person with vision, is very specific to why Deptford's success and continued efforts are going to be important. So I wanted to introduce the mayor, his formal bio. He is a lifelong resident of Deptford. He's a retired member of UA Local 322 and spent his career as a project manager. The mayor's been active in his community his entire life, involved in youth sports, various civic associations in the township, and served on township council for 21 years as a current member of the State League of Municipalities Legislative Committee, also a member of the New Jersey Conference of Mayors, so I've had some privilege to work with him on some reform efforts. And he engaged in the state level right now, crafting legislation that helps municipalities locally and statewide. So with that, please join me in a warm welcome for Mayor Medani.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Bill's been a great friend. Couldn't have a better friend. So, welcome to Deptford Township. Am I doing this thing with this thing here? All right, let me get that straight first. But anyway, so again, welcome to Deptford, to our great community. Mayors are cheerleaders for their communities. I want to tell you how great Deptford Township is, as my fellow mayors are going to tell you how great their communities are too. And they are. We're very fortunate to be in a great region and a great area here. Adelphia Restaurant, and I want to thank all the folks at Adelphia. This is a fantastic place, one of our fantastic restaurants and meeting venues, right? That's why we're here. So thank you for all of that. And so let me get right to it in consideration of time. So Deptford Township, let me move here. Let me make sure I'm going the right way. All right, we're going to get started right away. So in October of 2020, Deptford Township Council, we passed an ordinance authorizing an MCD, medical cannabis dispensary, in the BC2 zone, which the cannabis dispensary is right across the street or in the next block over. When we started the history of it, we had a lot of inquiries. That was when the cannabis industry was just heating up. It was in like 2019. And of course, we passed the ordinance in 2020. We interviewed companies that had applied for state licensing, et cetera, and we finally settled on a company called Columbia Care. So, but the thought process with Deptford Township Council and our economic development team was this, and you're going to hear me say this again. Our vision, our goal, and our plan is to draw customers, a customer base to Deptford Township to keep the mall alive. And look, let's face it, the Deptford Mall, it's one of the largest malls in this region right here. We have Cherry Hill Mall and some of the other malls aren't doing so well. We have to keep our mall thriving, and we have to keep this whole business center thriving. So the other thing we were doing is our economic development team, if you remember before the pandemic, which I'm going to mention, and I very rarely say that name because I want to forget about it, but online shopping was becoming very prevalent. And the pandemic hits in 2020. In March of 2020, that's when it really hit, and then all of a sudden the lockdown started. And I'll never forget it. I'm sitting in my mayor's office. I got a phone call, and they said the Deptford Mall was going to close for a day or two. And I put my head back, and I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? The Deptford Mall closed for weeks. And so that was a huge blow to our economy here in Deptford Township. So we were on the right track, knowing that we had to attract a variety of uses and couldn't rely strictly on the mall, and that's kind of the history of where we were going. I want to set that up. So let me change my slide here. Oh no, let me keep the slide up. So moving forward, this is Locust Grove Plaza, and Locust Grove Plaza is where we finally settled on cannabis. That's the name of our store. And the concept, like I said, was to draw a new customer base to Deptford Township. This plaza is literally across the street. It did pretty well. It had some vacancies in there, here and there, and there was vacancies around Deptford Township. Jumping ahead, when the cannabis store landed there, that was a boon to this area and a boon to that plaza. Right now, I think on the next slide, this is the plaza a little close up. You can see these stores that are in it, but down at the other end, which you can't see, there's 5 restaurants now. One just opened up, it's called Umi, it's a buffet restaurant, and that's part of the growth of this area because of the customer base that the cannabis store brought here. And eating and marijuana go together, right? So that was the plan, and the plan worked out well so far. So in December of 2020, we passed an ordinance approving the medical cannabis dispensary, and then in August of 2021, which that slide is coming up, we had an open up, that's the ribbon cutting, which I'm going to mention again, but that was in August of 2021. That's when we finally opened. So then in March of 2022, that opened as a medical dispensary. In March of 22, that's when we allowed the recreational or adult use at that same location. So the name of our store, of course, our ATC, is called Cannabis. It serves medical and adult recreational use customers. Customers can come in and speak with sales associate. I know some of you have been in there, and it's really a great place. You go in there and speak to the sales associates. They're really knowledgeable, and it's just a beautiful facility. Their hours vary slightly, but they open at 9 o'clock every morning. Most days, there's still a line there. When we leave here today, there's probably going to be a line. Another facet of it, though, is, and let me get to the next slide here, maybe. Okay, let me go back here. So another facet of this is job creation. And when we interviewed the companies, that was one of the big questions. How many jobs is this going to produce, and what kind of jobs will it produce? And they're good paying jobs. The sales associates are members of UFCW Local 360. They're a union shop, good paying jobs, highly trained sales associates. They have to get trained by the state, which most of you know, and then they get their ATC card. And there's 40 sales associates there. So they employ, on the average, of 40 or over people. Another interesting part of that story, though, part of the economic development story, inside cannabis, they have a display case where they sell accessories for the use. And that accessory manufacturer is right here in Deptford Township. It's a small local business called Smoking Cat. It's a pretty cool name. He's a glass blower, and he provides the accessories there and to other stores also. Very successful business, an offshoot of what cannabis has brought to Deptford Township. They average about 4,500 customers on a weekly basis. That customer base is coming to Deptford Township, and that was more than we had hoped for. So that was definitely part of the plan right there. Now, let me change the slide here. I want to get to the mall. So, and I spoke about the mall before. We're going to speak about that again because that's our economic engine here. So on a daily basis, there's 50 to 60,000 people that pass through Deptford Township. That's emergency management statistics. We have 32,000 people here. We're 18 square miles, 550 local roads. You know, I could go on and on, but that's the size of our community. But that's how much it grows on a daily basis. After Christmas, that grows to over 200,000 people passing through here on a daily basis. So that statistic of 4,500 customers, that adds to that, and that's exactly part of the plan. They use our stores, they use our eateries, they use our entertainment venues, they go shop at the mall. That's all part of it. We have, and part of that plan was attracting cannabis here, hoping that that's what it would do. We've also attracted Nemours Family Health Center, a world-class health center. And Spear is going to open up in the next block over soon. We have very few vacancies. Bed Bath & Beyond is one of our vacancies. The corporate bankrupted itself, but we get a lot of calls about that. So we're doing good here, and that's all part of it. The customer base, I want to speak about that, this is the mall in front of the mall. That's a Veterans Memorial, and I'm going to lead into that. Veterans and cannabis. I want to speak about this for a moment because when we talked to the different companies, our economic development team, when we were deciding what to do, if we were going to allow a license and open up a store, we heard over and over again that veterans are a huge customer base for cannabis. They, even though it's still illegal by the federal government, we researched it. Veteran participation in state programs doesn't affect their eligibility at the VA, which was a big deal. We got our Veterans Commission involved in this and talked to them and said, what do you think? They were 100% for it because veterans who suffer from PTSD, they've been reporting for years that cannabis helps their symptoms, helps PTSD. And there was a study published, I think, in December of 2020. It was quite an extensive study. It found that veterans were 2.5 times more likely to help their recovery from PTSD using cannabis products than those that are not using it. That's a hell of a statistic for any of you veterans in this room. And we have over 1,000 veterans living in Deptford Township alone. So that was a big deal with us. And you know, we always tell everybody, follow your physician's advice, but it's a huge customer base. Another part of the customer base in Deptford Township, look, we're a regional draw because of the mall. We get customers from South Jersey, they come up Route 55. We have a great location here, 6 state highways, countless county roads. We have a huge customer base that comes over from Philadelphia. We're 10 minutes from Philly. You can hop over the bridge for $5. Come here, go to the cannabis store, go to the mall, go eat at our restaurants, get back to Philly. If you live here, and a lot of our folks now are moving here from Philly, you jump back over the bridge, go to work, go to visit your family. So it's a great location right here. We like to say we're in the center of it all, even though everybody says that, but you know, that's what we do. Like I said, we're cheerleaders for Deptford. So, slide 6, Deptford welcomes you. This was an important part too. This is our municipal building. We wanted to show you that's the police station, which is part of the municipal building. This picture is from the time period when we were approving cannabis. That's some of the members of the previous Township Council, and that's our police department there. One of the priorities for Township Council, when we asked these questions extensively, was the safety factor involved in bringing a cannabis store, because look, it had a stigma back then. Now the stigma is fastly disappearing about cannabis use. But back 3 years ago, it was still out there. We held meetings with our residents. We talked to them at events. We got out and met our neighbors and friends and said, what do you think? Most people were for it, but there was a segment of the population, especially the older part, they thought we were going to draw the quote-unquote bad element, God forbid, the pot smokers to Deptford Township, knowing that half the people in this room and everybody who we're talking to was smoking the stuff. So, but that's okay. Right? So, but I can tell you this, for the last years the cannabis has been open, it's been quite the opposite. Our police department has 4 calls of cannabis since they've been open. And those 4 calls were minor calls. 2 of them were accidents. One of them, somebody thought their car was burglarized. They lost their car keys, and in fact, they found them. So the point is that I know, right? So the point is that it's been great. There's been no incidents there. When we finally open at the planning board level, when we plan the store, the security in these places is fantastic. So we toured it. They showed us their security measures. It's been all good. The police department toured it, all of our code officials. It's just been fantastic. Now, our police department does not provide security at our store. I know some other towns do that. We kind of insist that they get their own security guards, which they do, and that's been working out great. There's reasons we didn't want to do that. One of them is our cops are so busy. We didn't want to add something else to their call. So at the end of that, and I'm a little bit ahead of my time, I don't know, the clock just went on 0. But at the end of that, right, it's been fantastic for us. It's been an economic development engine, just like we planned it. It's brought folks to Deptford Township, a brand new customer base, almost 5,000 customers a month that wouldn't, or a week, that wouldn't have probably came to Deptford Township, would have went somewhere else. So we speak very highly of it. They've been great community neighbors, and it's been a fantastic experience. So thank you for listening to me. When you leave, go shop at the Deptford Mall, right? Go spend some money. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. There may be an even larger line after we're done here. So next up, again, a different perspective, different county, different style, but you'll see some similarities. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mayor Veazey for a long time, but I think you are newer to this experiment, and I think your challenges have been different. There's different politics and different things, but nevertheless, similar vision and similar tenacity that you've seen in other places, and you'll see as a continuing theme. So, Mayor Veazey, having been born and raised in Evesham, one of Jackie's top priorities remains her support of local businesses and her desire to strengthen the local economy. For the past decade, she's also served as a committee member for the Relay for Life of Marlton, a community event that raises funds for the American Cancer Society. Professionally, Jackie has worked in the insurance industry for more than a decade and is currently in insurance sales. Mayor Veazey is a graduate of St. Joan of Arc School and Holy Cross High School, and she attended Rutgers University, where she received her Bachelor's of Arts in American Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Evesham's Mayor, Mayor Jacqueline Veazey.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is quite a little bit of a journey for me to get down here this morning. I was like, oh, it's not around the corner. I just want to say thank you to the Chamber for inviting me to be here today, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen. So I'll just give you a little bit about Evesham. Definitely a different situation than what Deptford went through. So here's Evesham Township. If you don't know where we are, we're in Burlington County, right on the edge of Cherry Hill. And what most people don't realize is that we actually are 30 square miles large, and we have almost 50,000 residents who live in Evesham. Most people know Evesham by the Route 70 and 73 crossroads, which is in the center of town. But when it's not really in the center of town, because if you were to look at our map here, the intersection of Route 70 and 73 is pretty much right where that little square is. So that part of Evesham is what everyone knows. The rest of Evesham, which is kind of cut off on this picture, goes down and is residential area. So most of our commercial area runs right in the center of town, not the center of town, but the upper corner that you guys all know what I'm talking about, center of town, and the rest of it is residential. Now, if you've talked to me over the last couple of years, and I know Scott has talked to me, and Bill's talked to me, in 2019, if you were to ask me if Evesham was going to have cannabis, I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure my community is ready for it. I'm not sure if my community will want to, but let me just see. I'm not a cannabis person. I have nothing against cannabis, but I've never done it. I've never, it's just not my thing. This is 2019. So I'm like, we'll see. So when they did the voting for the referendum here in New Jersey, what happened was Evesham came back with almost a 70% approval rate that they would like cannabis to be legal. So that to me and to the rest of my council mates said, okay, Evesham would like to see cannabis here, they're open to it, and how are we going to make it come to fruition for our residents? Our residents are saying, we would like cannabis, and I need to put my personal opinion of it aside and say, how are we going to make this work? And the biggest thing for us as a council was to say, how do we make sure that if we're going to have cannabis here in Evesham, that it fits the look and feel of what Evesham represents? And that was a very big thing for us. So we took some time, and as Bill said, we were a little bit slower to the game. We did take some time in coming together with our ordinance and saying we're going to allow for cannabis to be here in Evesham. And we didn't adopt it until actually August of 2021. And at the time, what we did was we worked with our planners, we worked with our professional staff, and we came up with this area, which is a hatched area, which is considered the Evesham Crossroads overlay. Because when we decided that we wanted to do cannabis, we wanted to make sure that it was contained to our commercial area, that it was contained to a certain part of town so that it wasn't all over the town. And the Evesham Crossroads overlay is the exact section of town where Route 70 and 73 intersect. It was done when the circle was being removed from Evesham. They made the Evesham Crossroads overlay. So instead of making a new zoning area for cannabis, we said we'll just use the already existing Evesham Crossroads overlay and make that the area in which cannabis will be available. So anywhere within the Evesham Crossroads, you could do cannabis. It's a conditional zone, so they would still have to come to the planning board for approval, site plan approval, and then they could go and open up their cannabis shop. So the way that we allowed for up to 5 licenses in the Evesham Crossroads overlay for dispensaries, and then we said that we would allow for any other of the licenses in our industrial zone, which is much smaller, and unfortunately there's not really much room for it. It's just the way that Evesham is set up. We're not able to do a lot for the other licenses, but they're available. We said we're open to it. Immediately, we did start to get some inquiries about how they could come to us to become a cannabis dispensary. And what we did was we set up a process that our professionals that work for the township would basically screen. You would submit, like, we want to open a cannabis store, this is our location, this is what we'd like to do. They would screen it. If they thought that it was a viable business, they would then come and do a presentation to 2 of our council members, as well as our professionals, so that we could see what kind of business they were. They would have designs, they would show pictures, we would ask questions. We wanted to make sure that that their security was good, that they had the funding, that they had everything available to them before we would offer them a letter of support. So if they got through the 2 council members, it would be brought to the full council, and then we would approve them for a letter of recommendation. So we have provided 5 letters of recommendation for dispensaries, and then once they went through that process and they were ready to go, they had to come to our planning board. So then our planning board would review for site approval to make sure that they were fitting into everything that we said. One of the things that we were pretty strict on, some of the signs that we allowed for cannabis. We didn't want any leaves. We didn't want any pictures of joints in the signs. We wanted to make sure that things were kind of clean looking and that it fit into Evesham. And then Actually, what we discovered through the planning board process is that the planning board determined that they didn't want they didn't want the word dispensary to be in the signage either. So then we actually amended our ordinance, because every time a new business came in front of the planning board, they said, you need to remove the word dispensary, it doesn't fit into what we would like it to say. So we have actually 4 cannabis dispensaries that are coming, and they've been approved through planning board. And we have 1 more that we have given a letter of support to that has not opened yet or come to planning board. 1 of our cannabis dispensaries has opened. 2 more of them look like they're getting close to opening, and then we have 1 more that's still in a little bit of the construction phases. What I will say before I show you some pictures of our dispensaries, because we're very excited for them, now that it's been a couple of years, I'm very excited for it, so we'll see what happens. One of the challenges that we did have when you look at the zone, we thought the zone for the Evesham Crossroads overlay was very large. I mean, it took up a large part of Route 70 and 73. There's a lot of commercial buildings there. There's a lot of areas to build. And what happened was that there's actually, when the cannabis, they started to go out, the dispensaries started to go out to look for their space, they were very limited. They ended up being very limited because a lot of that retail space is run by shopping centers, and a lot of those shopping centers are investment properties, and they wouldn't allow for cannabis dispensary to be located in their shopping center. So our area that was pretty large and what we thought was, ended up being very shrunk down. So all 5 of our dispensaries, good or bad, are all on the Route 70 side of this. So if you're looking at the box, they're from the box to the end of the map. So it's from where Route 70 and 73 meet all the way to the Cherry Hill border. But there's 2 on each side of the highway and 1 right at the intersection. There has been some feedback that could be challenging, but we don't know until they're open what that's actually going to look like. However, on the positive side, as Mayor Medani is saying, the police actually are very happy that they're all in a small area, because it makes it much easier for them to monitor the location. And because Evesham is that crossroads, we do unfortunately get a lot of people who come through Evesham on a regular basis. So that is a very highly trafficked area of Evesham, and the police are already monitoring. So it makes it very safe for anyone who is going to the cannabis dispensaries, and it does make it safe for the cannabis dispensaries to operate, because there is so much security. Not only do they have security on site, but our Evesham police are there and able to handle everything. So here's a couple of pictures of our upcoming cannabis dispensaries. So one of them is Rooted of Evesham. They took an old building and they're rehabbing it right now on Route 70 going to the east. And they're actually hopefully going to be opening within the next couple of months. And we're very excited for them. They were actually the first ones that came to us. They were the first ones who we gave a letter of support to, very well-established group. And one of the big things, and I'm sure all of you in the cannabis industry know, one of the big things that we looked at was their community give back and what they wanted to do for the community. Because it's one thing to open a business and then just be here, but we wanted to make sure that you were going to be open to doing educational opportunities, working with our police department, supporting our school sport, our sports teams, just being part of the community, not just coming and using our community to open a cannabis location. So this was our first one that came to us that we gave, and they'll be coming soon. This was one of our next ones. This is Enlighten Dispensary. They were actually the first ones to come to the planning board for review, and they were the ones who it did say Enlighten Dispensary, and the planning board went through a process of asking them to remove dispensary from it, and they're going to be taking over the old Marlton Diner, if you know where that is on Route 70, going to the west. And then Highway 90, which is the last ones who we gave our approval to for recommendation of letter of support, but actually they're the only ones that are open yet so far. So congratulations to Highway 90. They took the old, there's an old building right at the corner, right by Chicken and Pete's, right near the old Olga's Diner, where there's a big RMA building. So they're the ones that are at the intersection of Route 70 and 73. And they opened in December and just had their grand opening in January. And from what I understand, they're doing very well. So that's exciting for us as a community that it's being embraced. We've had no issues. And our police have said there's been no issues that came from the cannabis. So that's our overall picture of cannabis and how we got to where we are today with our cannabis dispensaries. And like I said, we're still working through it, and as it comes to fruition and all of the rest of the dispensaries open, we will see how those 5 play out in that small area. But I think that I keep saying I think that it's going to work out because it's on 2 different sides of the highway, and people don't like to cross the highway. So you're going to go one way, you're going to go the other way, and it'll work together. So we're looking forward to what the next step of cannabis in Evesham is. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Just a quick comment on Mayor Veazey. You're going to hear from our last panelists on the local expert level, but you're seeing the expert work that they do. They're experts in what works for their community, and that's why these things are successes and not failures. Taking the time to listen to your constituents, taking the time to understand what makes the most sense. And by the way, I don't know how many people go out and buy coffee outside of their home, but I'm sure there's Dunkin' Donuts customers, Starbucks customers, that small little coffee shop on the corner customers. That's the model here. You can have multiples, but your local officials are going to understand what's sustainable based on what their professionals know can work. So that's why every town is doing this in a different way and doing it in their own right, which is what the law affords them, and it's smart. For everyone looking for opportunities out there's more coming online because of pioneers like this that are now demonstrating the successes, not failures, of what's going on. Our last mayor is an expert in his town. He's also an expert in government. I've had the pleasure of working with Dave Mayer over literally the course of my entire career. When I got to Rob Andrews' office as a young lad, 22 years old, Dave had already transcended on to bigger and better things, but he was always a resource to call on expert level. Dave has been a pioneer on anything you can possibly imagine, and I can tell you this because when I'm sitting at home watching the nightly news, I see Dave on TV now because they're constantly advertising about all the work they're doing on recycling in their town, and Dave really made that a very cool prospect, and they continue to dig in. So Dave's been doing really cool and innovative things before people were doing cool and innovative things. So his formal introduction, since taking office in 2010, Mayor Mayer has been reelected in 2013, 2017, and 2021. He's worked hard to promote economic development and job creation in Gloucester Township, opening one of the largest economic development projects in the South Jersey region, the Gloucester Premium Outlets, that alone created over 400 construction jobs and 600 permanent positions. Mayor Mayer currently serves as Director of Government Affairs for New Jersey American Water. He also serves on the board of the directors for this chamber, the Chamber of Commerce of Southern New Jersey, and is chair of Rowan Rutgers University's Camden Board of Governors. With that, please welcome my friend, Dave Mayer.
Good morning, Bill. Thanks so very much. I'm honored to call you a friend. Christina and Meredith, thanks for having me. I have to tell you, you made a dream come true for me. I've had a lifelong goal of always being on a panel with Paul Medani, the infamous Paul Medani. And certainly I said to Jackie as she sat down here, I said, my gosh, you're a rose between two thorns. So it's really an honor to serve with these mayors. I have to tell you, as a mayor, we certainly concentrate on our town, and we love our communities. But we're very fortunate in this area that we work with one another, that we get along, and we look at it as a region. And certainly the cannabis industry can contribute to that region. Let me see here. Let me begin by saying that I can say this as a former legislator, and Scott, you can attest to this, that, many of you in this room did a great job getting the legislation passed and the framework that we are now working under with the commission. But sometimes, things just get trickled down to the towns. And so now we have this football, it's like a football game. We catch this football, And towns now have to figure out how to deal with this. And thanks to Bill and Scott and others, they can give us guidance of how to work in this framework. And so we've taken a little bit of a different approach in Gloucester Township. You know, when this whole thing came about, we said to ourselves, look, and I'm going to be frank with you, it's about revenue. And, you know, property taxes, New Jersey, property taxes are property taxes in New Jersey, and towns have to look for different revenue sources. And quite frankly, this is one of them. And so we said to ourselves in Gloucester Township, which by the way is just kind of right over there. I did use my passport to get in here today, Paul. And let me but let me add to Paul's comments. He said, when you leave here, go shopping at the mall. I'm going to say, when you leave here, go shopping at the Gloucester Premium Outlets, right down the street. You know, we said to ourselves, look, if we don't opt into this, then other towns are going to opt into this, and they're going to get the revenue, and we're not. And so we opted in, and we took an approach that said, and I'll explain the ordinances, that basically said, this is the areas in which you can have a retail, a cultivation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, facility or what have you. And if you fit into those areas, you're going to get the letter and the resolution that you need. We're not going to judge you. Like, we're not going to pick people because I don't know how to do that. I can't, and the council can't, judge one company over the other. And so we have taken a pretty broad approach on this, and we figure we'll let the market figure it out. And so in Gloucester Township right now, we have 2 retail centers that are open. We have one that is approved and they're renovating right now, but they're going to convert, they're medical, but they're going to convert to recreational. And one of the things that is unique in Gloucester Township is the cultivating facility that we are going to have. So several years ago, individuals came into town and they said, hey, we want to open up build a cultivating center here. And I said, sure. But the town has 16 acres on Cross Keys Road that was an old, we call it the Nike base, but it was an old missile base during the Cold War, the Nike missiles. And we bought it from the federal government in 2003. And we are developing that. And I said to these individuals, Resonate is the name of the company, I said, absolutely, you can come here, you can build your cultivation facility, but you have to go to the Nike base. And I'm not selling you the land, because I don't want a one-time revenue. You're going to lease the land. They said, absolutely. So we have an agreement with them. They have their license from the state. And what is amazing to me right now, we are negotiating a lease for that property. And we did pass an ordinance and for a cultivator in our general industry zones. But that is, it's a redevelopment area that we have in the Nike base, so we can kind of, it's easy to kind of deal with that stuff. So we're really excited, about that, because of not only, having them there and the jobs that it creates, but the revenue that it's going to produce. Not only the 2% that towns will get, but the lease that we're going to get on that. And it's very interesting, this Nike base. We're going out next week for requests for qualifications for a developer of this property. And we're going to do a P3. Public-private partnership. It's a state statute that allows us to do this, where we're going to lease the land, not only to the cultivation facility, but also to whatever else developers want to do there. We're going to get proposals and things like that. When they lease that land, we're going to take some of the revenue and build a police station at that location. That's the goal. So imagine this. You're going to have the cultivation center and a police station right next to each other. So how the world has changed, Bill.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And so we're really looking to do that because our town is growing. As we speak, we have 1,500 housing units under construction in Gloucester Township. And I can tell you, I say this all the time, you know, mayors, you know things before others, not because they're smart necessarily, but the people who are coming in to see us. We can see what's happening. And I have to tell you, Gloucester Township is growing, a town of over 70,000 people now. We don't know it, Michelle, right? We don't know it because we have 7 zip codes, none of which are called Gloucester Township. It's Sicklerville, it's Glendora, it's Blackwood, they're not towns. Please understand, they are not towns. There is no mayor of Blackwood. There's a mayor of Gloucester Township. So we passed the ordinance, and we're excited to have the cultivation units facility in town. And you can get all this information. This is our ordinance that we passed. As I mentioned, the retail ordinance, we do limit distances between them to 2,000 feet and distances to daycare and things like that. But so far, you know, it's working out, and it's working out well. Again, we've taken a hands-off approach as far as, you know, if you find a place that fits, you're in. But we have a highway commercial zone. We have a commercial residential zone for retail. And again, this goes through the specifics of that, which you can get, and I'm sure the Chamber can share with you if you're interested in neighborhood commercial zone. That's there. But again, you know, we're open for business. There's a lot happening in our communities, and you know, happy to entertain your questions. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, missiles to marijuana, pot to police. I like it.
Fantastic.
I like it a lot.
It's pretty good.
Ladies and gentlemen, 3 different towns, 3 different mayors, 3 amazing, innovative, pioneering approaches to this wild experiment that you're seeing successes start to develop. These folks are paving the way for every other municipality right now, and there's many more that have these success stories too, but more and more are coming online. And that's one of the still impediments to the growth of this industry, but it's also changing, and it's changing every minute. And you're seeing it changing in ways that work for their towns. We're listening to the experts here. That was what the statutory intent was when the bill was passed, and that's what these folks are now doing, and they're doing it as best works for them, and that will also work for your industry. Really a pleasure to have the expertise here on the panels today. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for them. And we're going to entertain some questions out from the audience. I'd ask you to raise your hand, and when we call on you, just wait till we get the mic to you. I see Mr. Kehoe in the corner there. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Bill. How are you? I have a question for Mayor Medani.
Yes,
Sure you do.
Mayor, unfortunately, I was tardy this morning while you were giving your comments. What has been the comments from the businesses in the strip center where the cannabis company is?
They're extremely happy. They're thriving. They're doing well. Like I said, a new buffet just opened up. That space was vacant for probably 4 or 5 years. Just opened up a couple months ago, and you can't even get into the place. So they're all good.
What might have been the comments prior to the store opening?
Well, there's a history to those comments. You know, I mentioned before you walked in late, Jim, that
Thanks for reminding me.
that you know, during the pandemic, the Deptford Townships of the world took a dive, and you know, it was hard recovering. Some of them are still recovering. So the comments now are like, thank you. You know, thank you for bringing this customer base here.
And being your proximity to the wall, do you see is there a lot of Pennsylvania tags in that lot?
There is. There's a lot of Pennsylvania tags historically in Deptford, like I said, because of the mall. But yes, at the store and the shopping center, absolutely. Big customer base.
And as somebody who represents the company that's there, Deptford has been a great host town, and you guys have been great to work with.
And the company's been great too. It's been a great partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, I understand the reason you were late this morning is you were doing some late Valentine's Day shopping in Deptford before you got here. Good for you, sir. Always important. Mr. Magazoo.
Always dangerous to follow Mr. Kehoe. Mayor, question. The Nike spot, is that large enough to handle a second cultivation, or do you have do they have exclusivity, the folks who are there? I'm thinking if it's a missile site, it's probably a pretty big site.
Yeah, well, 16 acres. There's no exclusivity. Yeah, look, so we're going to, put out
Maybe make a
for.
campus there. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but a cultivation campus.
Look, we're wide open. Like it's a mound of clay right now. We're going to sculpt it into something. And so what we're doing next week is going to go out and ask developers for ideas. And if the idea is another cultivation center, that's fine. But let's, figure out, how that works. The goal then, the public purpose of that is to build a police station as well. Because
the single, I'm sure you'll talk about it at some point. I think the single biggest impediment to cannabis growth in the state right now is going to be supply chain because of cultivation. So if there's communities that have already made that tough decision, it makes more sense to direct clients to those folks rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. All right, thank you.
Direct them to me, Lou.
Michelle? She's coming behind me.
Is that your person? Is that your person? Oh,
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you to all the mayors for being here today. Appreciate the work you're doing, especially my mayor, Mayor Dave. Thank you. We spent 2 hours together on this before this all came about, so very proud of the work that's happening in Gloucester Township. My question is for all three of you. As we looked at the great companies that came in, and it's a two-part question. Number one, are the companies that are coming in, are they national, or are you really trying to cultivate or bring in homegrown talent and startups as well? Number one. Number two, outside of the experiment of business, I always like to think of a word of redeeming ourselves with cannabis because, again, this was legal in the 30s, and now we're kind of redeeming ourselves. What are you looking at in your communities in terms of R&D and looking at the opioid epidemic? Mayor Medani, when you brought up veterans, that kind of triggered that for me. So those are the two areas that I'd like to get your insights on. Thank you.
Well, in Deptford Township, to the business point, yeah, sure, we're welcoming small business. That would be great, small startups, et cetera. The store that we have now is a national company. It's a big company, which is good too. There has to be a mix of small business and large business to keep this thing going. So, yeah, we're getting calls from small startups, and we're definitely entertaining them and talking to them. The medical part of it, like PTSD, et cetera, for veterans, that was a big part of the decision-making process. It's extremely important. A lot of folks are using the medicinal part, and it's helping them tremendously. It's a different alternative to traditional medicine, if you will. So, yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah.
For us, all of our 5 dispensaries are all local. They're not a corporate one. I will say, I mean, you all know, it takes a lot of capital to build a cannabis dispensary. So they are partners. A lot of them do have partners who might be in the larger space, but they all have a local feel to them. They're all with local people who are running them. So there's not like another one of rooted in Evesham someplace else. So they're all local ones. And then I think your second question was in regards to the opioids. And so if you know the Evesham Township Police Department and how we handle things, we're always doing very innovative things to try to help people who might have any problems and how we can help support them. So we're always doing that in Evesham. We haven't mixed that with cannabis per se, not yet. Maybe it'll be something down the line as we do more of our community engagement. We're a very big community on community engagement. So once we get more of our cannabis locations open and we have that partnership going on, there'll probably be more opportunity for that.
Yeah, Nichelle, thanks. We have a combination. So we have a company, a Canadian company. The cultivation company is a national company, but we have small businesses as well, local businesses. We're working with a micro license, I believe it's called, to open one of them as well. So we have a combination of that. As far as the opioid crisis is concerned, you know, we were the first town in the state of New Jersey to put a drug counselor in our courtroom, in our municipal court. And it has been so successful that we have, the county has now taken that, our county commissioners are now taking that, you know, to the entire county and is funding that program because it works so well. When the outlets opened, we created a retail patrol bureau within our police department, certainly to you know, for shoplifting and things like that. But the real reason was because people are shoplifting. Some of the folks are shoplifting because, you know, they're addicted and they have the disease of addiction. And we specially train our retail patrol officers to deal with that and to work with our drug counselor that we have to try to get these individuals help. So it's certainly, it's a horrible disease, and we need to do something about it, and we're trying.
And Michelle, if I could just add to this on a global level, you are an expert. We are lucky to have you both here in this chamber and at large in this community helping so many. I know you have dug in here, adding your expertise. But we're going to cover this a little bit in the last panel, because part of our problem on a lot of these issues is our dysfunction at the federal level. But good things are coming there too. And this is a place that New Jersey is going to be able to capture that magic because we're already there. But the ability to attach this to medical research, real medical research now, that's going to stay here in New Jersey. And the manufacturing jobs and the research and IP that's going to be developed here in New Jersey. We're not able to tap into that yet. That's coming. That's literally on the horizon. These folks have actually built the engine already that we're able to put the gasoline into once it's allowed. So that is a forward-looking question that you're asking, but I know why you're asking. I know where you are. And that's coming, ladies and gentlemen. That's the next horizon that we'll all be able to capture beyond just retail, beyond just cultivation, and with all due respect, the manufacturing boom that's sitting on the horizon and one of the most educated workforces in the free world. So exciting stuff. And it was a great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Mr. McNally.
How are you folks? Joe McNally. My company is basically a networking company, and we're like the glue that puts people together. I was approached by a landowner in a small town in Burlington County who has basically a turnkey operation. And I also have a national partner who came and looked at the property and they fell in love with it. I can't get the town council to budge off opting in. They gave me a whopping 4 minutes at their town council meeting to explain the benefits, other than the obvious revenue and employment opportunities. Would there be any recommendation from you folks who've seen it firsthand to maybe get the needle to move? I have a feeling this is strictly, they believe this is a partisan issue. Is there any recommendations on your part that I should approach and ask the council? I even asked one of the members to come to and join me with this event. Would there be any recommendations you guys would make to help me get that needle to move in the right direction?
On our end, it's simply a phone call. Call me up. We'll get you to meet with our committee. The council meeting isn't the best place to do that because that's really for government business. So they probably hit you with the public speaking portion of 3 or 4 minutes, and that's it. So it would be better to call one of the mayors or you know, part of the economic development team, and we'll get you into a meeting, or we'll at least open up a phone call and see what you got. Sure, we'd welcome that.
You know, local, you know, politics is very local, and you know, we're the closest level of government to people. So it can be a little difficult, but you know, education is the key, and if you can find key stakeholders in that town that you can educate, you know, maybe the elected officials might not be as educated on this subject at this moment, but maybe there are other key stakeholders in the town that you can approach. I don't know if they have a business like a chamber of commerce or you know, anything like that, but some of the key stakeholders that you can reach out to and try to educate, I think is probably the best avenue for you.
I'll just piggyback off of them, but I would say yes to both of what they're saying. I would look to see if you could have a meeting directly with the mayor or council members and talk to them outside of a council meeting. It's usually much more successful. And then I would also say education is the number one thing. Like I said, when I started, I was not one that was like, I'm not so sure about it, but in just having conversations, meeting with people like Bill, and like I said, I met Scott Rutter, and just learning more about the benefits of cannabis, then it kind of opened my eyes on how we can make it work in our community. So I would definitely employ both of the strategies that were recommended.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're unfortunately out of time. I want to again thank this amazing panel with a round of applause from all of you. We're going to take a very brief, about 10-minute break, and we'll be back with our next chapter of the program. Thank you.
All right, at this point, I'm going to turn the panel back over to our Master of Ceremonies, Bill Caruso. Bill, podium's yours.
Thanks, Christina. You can turn on cable news right now and watch levels of dysfunction at our federal level that you can't even imagine, right? I'm happy today that we have two amazing people that I have grown up with in this business, I call friends, but have been absolutely the opposite of what we see. In New Jersey right now, cannabis is still an experiment. We're still working towards the progress, but we are a model. We are a model for a nation. We are maybe a model in an international way, and it's because of these two in a lot of ways. It's because of the blend that we have between our legislative branch and our executive branch working together, and also partnering with industry to do better and learn each day, as you heard from the last panel. We're lucky. And the reason I can say this, by the way, is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and we have other states in the nation trying to replicate, either on the front end as they're diving into this experiment, or re-engineering from the back end of states that went before us, maybe got there first, but didn't get their best. Jersey's getting their best, and it's because, in a lot of ways, a lot of the work that's gone on here. Joining us today on this panel, we have my friend and the chair of the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, Diana Wainu. In this role, she's charged with establishing and growing a responsible, regulated medicinal and recreational cannabis industry in the state. Prior to this role, Diana served as policy advisor and associate counsel in Governor Phil Murphy's office, advising the governor on policy and legislative issues concerning criminal justice, military and veterans, community affairs, and immigrants' rights. Beyond her time in the administration, Diana was policy counsel at the ACLU New Jersey, where she developed legislative-focused strategies for a variety of advocacy campaigns, and as part of that function, Diana led the organization's coalitions advocating for cannabis legalization and Newark police reform. Thank you, Diana, for being here. A round of applause, please. And also joining us in this conversation today is my friend, Senator Troy Singleton of the 7th Legislative District, which encompasses parts of Burlington County. The senator has served in the Senate since 2018. He previously served in the Assembly, filling a vacancy in 2011 and winning 4 full terms. Currently, Senator Singleton serves as chair of the Senate Community and Urban Affairs, as vice chair of the Health and Human Services and Senior Citizens Committee, and as member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He also serves in Senate leadership as Majority Whip. Thank you, Senator, for all you do, and please join me in welcoming Senator Singleton.
Thank you.
Now, if it's okay with you both, I'm going to leave you guys so you can sit. I'm going to stay here. We're going to ask you some questions, and we're going to riff off of your answers on what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned previously, Senator Singleton is at the forefront of this, not today, not yesterday, for many, many years. One of the reasons we have this model where we're leading in racial and social justice first and building an economy is because of the brain power that Senator Singleton brought to the table, pushing this forward as an advocate, but making us get better as we push this process forward. I came to the table as an advocate. So Senator Singleton, this past June, we had a check-in. You were on that committee. We had a full discussion about where we were with the industry through the Senate Judiciary Committee that you're a member on. what were your thoughts of that? What were your views of that hearing and where we are as an industry and as a state?
So first of all, good morning, everyone. I would probably tell you, I think we collectively have underestimated the difficulty of raising an industry up in our state. And that difficulty, though, has taught us a lot of lessons, and I think important lessons about how we go about creating the regulatory framework that is going to be so critically important for this nascent and still burgeoning industry to truly flourish in our state. One of the bigger challenges that we discussed, and Diana and I discuss publicly, we discuss privately all the time, is our challenge is still with pricing of cannabis in our state. And I think it is something that we cannot let go of and continue to really forcefully try and talk about. We know that there are a significant number of actors who are in multiple states whose price point for the same quantity and quality of cannabis differs once they cross the Walt Whitman Bridge, Ben Franklin Bridge, Bridge du Jour, as it were, and they get in the state of New Jersey. And that is a challenge for many of us, especially those of us who really believe on the medicinal side that cannabis is medicine to so many people. So that is something that we've paid close attention to. We continue to talk through with the CRC how we can provide, build the tools necessary for them to use their regulatory authority to address this situation. The other piece I would add around this, and I think it is telling how the system works. You have a system that has a lot of free market principles in a closed club society. And I want to say that again. You have a lot of free market principles in a very closed club society because it is not everyone who walks through the door who gets to be a cannabis provider. So the structure that we have doesn't always allow for our regulators to use all the tools at their disposal. We actually should provide them additional tools, understanding that this environment is different. It is just not market pressure that typically puts downward pressure on pricing. We have more individuals in the marketplace. We still have a relatively closed club of how that marketplace works. So we want to make sure that our regulators who are doing the best they can on a daily basis have those tools. And I think a lot of that hearing sort of brought a lot of that out to many of us, and we continue along that journey to try and address that. But all that being said, I mean, we just, and Diana will correct me if I get this wrong, I think it was just the other day we passed 100 retail spots all throughout our state, which is important. Some would argue we probably need 100 more, and we need to try and do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. But we also should be proud of a lot of the work we have done. We literally started a sort of industry here in New Jersey trying to take some of the good qualities that happen elsewhere and refine some of the bad ones. And we're on that journey together. We've made an enormous amount of progress. It is a learning tool for all of us. But we always say there's still work that remains. And I think that's what came out of that hearing the most. We have done some incredibly good things, but there's still a lot of work that remains ahead.
Thanks, Senator. I really appreciate it. Madam Chair, similar question. You were at that hearing. Played a major role in that hearing. What were your impressions, and generally your impressions of where you guys are going and perhaps the work that you're doing with the legislature?
Yes, thank you, and good morning to you all. Thank you for the Chamber for inviting me to participate. It's always a great time to participate and speak at the Chamber's events. So yeah, I think that the hearing was actually very beneficial, not just for the legislature and the public, but also for us as an agency. I know Senator Singleton is a big believer in making sure that government is transparent and accountable. And even just yesterday at our last board meeting, I announced several priorities for the commission for this year, and the overarching theme of those priorities is transparency and accountability. I think that I appreciate the Senator's reflections and recognizing that we are tasked with, we as a collective, right? Government and the private sectors tasked with erecting and expanding a new industry, and to do so at a fast pace, right, because we can never do things fast enough, but also making sure that we're doing it responsibly and doing our due diligence as we do that work. And so when it comes to the way that the commission does its due diligence, right, we have to take our work in twofold. So first is making sure that the industry and the public knows what we are expecting of them, and we give clear messages about what the requirements are, what the rules of the road are, and what the consequences could be if you stray from those rules. And then also making sure that once application is received by applicants, that we are vetting it thoroughly and making sure that we are living up to our responsibility as a government agency to actually apply and implement the rules that we are setting up. So we do that through constant communication with applicants, by working with legislators. I know Senator Singleton has joined many conversations with the commission outside of the structure of a legislative committee hearing. And it's so that, and we encourage it, and we really seek those opportunities out so that we give the legislature the accurate information so that they can in turn help their constituents and make sure that they understand how the law that they put their vote to is being implemented. And so we use our public board meetings really as a measuring stick for our priorities. And I want to touch on one of those priorities that Senator Singleton actually mentioned, and that is pricing. So we at the commission recognize that pricing is a major concern for consumers and patients. And so one of our priorities for this year that I mentioned during our board meeting yesterday is for us to utilize those tools that we have to find ways to reduce the cost, particularly for medicinal cannabis, because our patients should not have to pay so much money out of pocket for their medicine, for relief from the ailments that they're suffering from.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the things you're going to continue to hear is this collaborative effort, this cooperative effort. As we joke in this space, we're building the plane while we're flying the plane, although I think we've built out some of the wings and infrastructure now. It is an experiment that needs that constant attention back and forth. One of the difficulties, in addition to building an entirely new industry and building entirely new regulatory structure in an area that was once illegal, and now we're transitioning into the sunlight, was also lifting up equity. Both of you have been outstanding advocates, both in your former roles and current roles, and bringing that realization to the table. So I want to talk to you each about the role that you've had in lifting up equity. Senator Singleton, I know you've worked on actual specific legislation increasing investment. Chairwoman, I know you've done a lot within the organization at CRC to lift up equity. So I'll switch up the order here if you don't mind. Ladies first this time, if you don't mind. Maybe, Madam Chair, to give us a little bit of the ideas of the challenges and also some of the successes you're seeing.
Certainly. So the equity is one of our core values. We mean it so much that we put it into our logo. And you're right, Bill, that we really take equity to heart in this industry because we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of this new opportunity of starting a new industry, of creating a new agency, and making sure that we're doing that in a way that reflects equitable access to opportunities for folks. So what that means is we set out to intentionally make sure that our rules of the road for cannabis businesses reduced barriers that we saw pop up in other states. So we have among the lowest application fees in the country. We make sure that we try to give flexibility for businesses where we're allowed by law. We have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion that does targeted outreach to communities that have historically been cast aside and left behind by government. And we really needed to do so with a deliberate intent an honest approach. So we've also partnered with wonderful state agencies like the Business Action Center to help provide technical assistance to individuals who might not have some of that formal business experience and might need some direction to assist them in their journey of entrepreneurship. We also partnered with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority to offer grants for individuals, for businesses, given the high barriers that typically are found in this industry. And also, importantly, we make sure that we are hiring internally in a way that is equitable and reflects diversity and representation and breathes life into the value of young talent that there is across the state of New Jersey. So we continue to do equity work both outside of the agency and within the agency. And I'm really happy that I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can breathe life and implement the rules and the laws that I helped write that do create an equitable industry for the nation to really use as a model.
And just pull on that thread, in a previous hearing, it was identified by the legislature that there was an impediment to using the EDA as a resource, which is available to many other businesses, because of the first law that we wrote. And within weeks, which in Trenton is lightning fast, legislators got to the table and opened that door so that cannabis applicants now had access to the EDA. It was a statutory impediment, so that's the coordination. Now, far beyond that was a general work. Senator Singleton's been micro-level targeting, focused on increasing equity through investment and other things. Senator, give us some of the ideas you've been working on and some of the things you've actually helped implement.
Sure. First of all, we're incredibly proud of a couple different things. And before I jump into my stuff, I want to just take a thread from what you just said. So the prohibition of our Economic Development Authority, truly the sort of cheerleader from state government's perspective for business, to be able to partner with cannabis businesses was a glaring omission, more of a nod to politics than policy, just to be frank, when this first started. It was corrected. And by it being corrected, the EDA has leapt full throttle into providing resources, especially around the conversation around social equity businesses. And the work that they're doing, the grant programs they have set up, they are actually putting money on the street to helping so many of these burgeoning cannabis, soon to be large, big businesses, but are starting small, by giving them the seed money, the work that they need in significant chunk. It is not like not to dismiss a $5,000 grant, because Lord knows that that's important, but they're giving out larger pieces to be meaningful and impactful to these businesses through so many of their programs, the Cannabis Equity Grant Program being one. I think that's about $12 million that's set aside for them through that program. They are working to make a difference in those businesses' lives. And then from our standpoint, what we tried to look at from a legislative standpoint is we had to recognize, to me, cannabis businesses are businesses. The cannabis part is irrelevant. They're businesses. They should be all treated the same. So the ability to do the deductions that were hindering their growth, actually artificially heightening their tax exposure. We were able to get that signed into law. I was proud to author that law, and the governor signed it in order to say all these businesses are the same. Regardless that the federal government is still light years behind us in understanding what cannabis is and isn't as it relates to the schedule, but the business is the business. I mean, the government has no problem taking the tax resources. We should make sure the deductions fall in line with that as well. So that was something that we were able to get done. On the equity piece, look, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say that I stand at the forefront in trying to ensure that minority women and veteran-owned businesses in this space have a real seat at the table. It's not a knock on the corporate cannabis world, but I believe in the small business cannabis world and want to see them have real opportunities to grow. So we were able to create, in partnership with so many legislation that allows this partnership that will need it for some that don't have the capital to start, but have the dream and desire to carry it forward and make sure those resources are available. And we've seen that impact in partnership with the work that the EDA is doing, in partnership with the work that the CRC is doing to make sure the structure is right. All of that comes together all from the seed of the very first conversation with former Senate President Steve Sweeney, who, when we sat there and said, if we're going to do a social equity component, it cannot be lip service. Significant amount of resources also has to go to the communities that have been affected by this war on drugs, by this war on cannabis that has prevailed for far too long. And we want to make sure that both entrepreneurs and the communities benefit from this. And that's the crux of the social equity component of the existing statute that I and so many members of the Legislative Black and Hispanic Caucuses fought for. We're seeing the fruits of that by that EDA grant program I talked about, by the additional work that we've done to provide opportunities for entrepreneurs to get capital. That to me is the equity that we strive for and we've pressed upon. And with a true partnership, both with the private sector and our government partners, we're starting to see so much more of that fruit come to fruition. It is not just lip service. I ask anyone, if you don't believe what I'm saying, go to the EDA's website. They'll have the list of all the companies that have been in this social equity grant programs that they're getting. Grants, not loans. I underscore that, grants. They're getting this money and they're putting it out there and they're moving these businesses forward. That was our dream, that was our vision, and that's how we continue to work together.
And that vision's coming to reality because of that work. We sat at tables trying to figure out as advocates how we're going to make this come to fruition. We talked the game. There were press releases that went out with good people that were attached to them. But this is where you have to trust the process. I know that's a pretty trite phrase, but it's really important here. And it takes good leaders, and it takes that cooperation where you have your regulator in the executive branch, and you have leaders in the Senate and leaders in the Assembly that are going to stand up and continue to dig in on the legislative stuff. This stuff is hard. It's really hard to understand, and it's hard to legislate it. But it's happening, it's real, and it's working hand in glove. Diana, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that deserves a round of applause for both of you. Madam Chair, give us some updates on some latest news and initiatives from your world in the CRC. I know there's a lot going on, and you can highlight a couple things. I know you have announcements yesterday, right, with your meeting, but give us some ideas of some things that are going on right now.
Absolutely. But yes, in short, there is a lot going on. I would be remiss if I didn't note at the top that the work that we are doing is coming to fruition, as Senator Singleton said. He mentioned that we recently surpassed the 100 mark to have we have now, I believe it's 102 recreational and medicinal dispensaries that are open and serving individuals in New Jersey right now. And we've been able to do that starting from, I think, 12 businesses back in 2021 when the commission was first launched. So we really are exploding when it comes to the size of our industry and the number of businesses that are actually able to hang their shingles up and realize their dreams. From the commission's side, we're constantly approving new businesses for getting their annual license, helping them get across the finish line so that they can open their doors. Some of our priorities include, that I mentioned earlier, including the priority on making sure that we're doing work to try to reduce some of the costs for our consumers and our patients. We are also looking to make sure that we are doing the work that a government agency should be doing to ensure transparency and that we are being held accountable. So using our public board meetings to share out information on the priorities, conducting assessments of the industry to make sure that we understand both the qualitative and quantitative data that should be driving our decision making. We're working with stakeholders and from them what issues and challenges they are facing so that we have an informed understanding of what's happening on the ground and we can respond accordingly. And we've got Scott Rutter who can attest to that just from earlier this week. And so we really are trying to reiterate and underscore our commitment to be a government agency that is open and accountable and committed to working with the industry and working with partners in government to make sure that as our cannabis industry evolves, that we are learning from past errors, we're learning from past mistakes, and taking steps, taking action to make things better for the state of New Jersey and for our businesses.
Thank you. And just highlight one thing as a transition back, because I don't want to forget about where we started here on the medicinal side, but one other achievement that the Cannabis Commission has just unveiled was the complete elimination of medical fees for cannabis patients now, which were vestige of the past. Fantastic. And I want to close out this portion of the panel with some amazing work that my friend Senator Singleton's worked on, and I had the pleasure of working for him when he served in the People's House in the Assembly. But Troy Singleton has always been a friend of patients. This was a different time back then, but he has been consistent. And Senator, I heard your comments about the pricing, and you've been a leader on that, but you've also been a leader on the home grow piece, which has been a forgotten piece, if you don't mind me saying. But you haven't forgotten it, ever. You've been there from every step of the way. Can you talk to us, one, about your legislation, the importance about it, why you've been steadfast on this, and maybe where the possibilities are of it getting enacted?
Well, the second part of that question is the shortest answer I can give you. I like it, the Senate President doesn't, so until he likes it, I probably won't get very far, to be honest with you. Home grow to me, and I think how I would phrase it, is in most states that I've had research on, where you have a burgeoning recreational industry, you have a burgeoning medical, sort of medicinal program that has home grow as well. It doesn't cannibalize any bucket from either two. There are not a bunch of kids running around growing cannabis in their backyard, getting high at 7-Eleven or Wawa or convenience store du jour where you live. There's a lot of myths, too many boogeymen about that process, and I continue to talk about it in forums, public and private, that we should just call it out for what it is. And it is folks who are intentionally trying to deny people, and just on the medical side, even if we just landed there, they're intentionally trying to deny people an opportunity to grow their own medicine. And when you have the pricing structure that we've talked about, that we all know is a challenge for our medical patients, to not allow someone to have an opportunity because of our inaction to get their medicine in a way that's responsible, with limits, have to go through the CRC, make sure that person is registered to grow, so it's just not anyone doing it. And frankly, not everyone is going to do it. Just be clear, just because it happens doesn't mean that I'm gonna go start growing in my backyard. I'd probably blow my house up or do something crazy. But I think it is really important that we keep talking about this, because we need to keep pulling back the layers behind that tell us we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it. And it's frustrating to me, oftentimes because of the work that we did on the prescription drug piece, which we fought on and the governor signed last year. We believe that if we find the tools to put downward pressure on pricing, we're actually going to help people in this space more than we will ever know. I had a chance to talk to an ALS patient who uses cannabis to help them. And the depth of the conversation we had was very clear. This woman, when we talked, said, Troy, it's cost prohibitive for me to go to the medicinal dispensary to get cannabis. No drug that I use eases my pain, helps me feel better as I'm making the fight of her life through ALS. But cannabis gives her a sense of comfort and peace. And when you hear these stories, and these were the same stories we heard about the different prescription drugs that folks need to keep them going, whether it's insulin, you name it. It's the same story, insert just a different piece. And I think we have to do all that we can to continue this dialogue, continue this effort to allow folks to be able to use and grow cannabis in their own homes. I've taken trips around the country to hear about it, to really understand, am I misstating the fact that there's this burgeoning problem in communities where home grow exists? The next story will be the first story I find that says that. So I think for all of us, it's like we need a chorus of voices who are willing to continue to talk about it. I talk to advocates all the time, and they beg our health committee chairman, Senator Vitale, to move it forward. And to his credit, because as a member of leadership, I'll tell you, I'll get in trouble for this, but whatever. We see all the agendas when they come. He puts it on every agenda. Every agenda he puts it on. Every public agenda it's not on. It's a fact that and the Senate President and I disagree with this very strongly, and he's my friend, but we disagree. That the world will not end if we allow this in a structured way. And we're going to keep fighting, we're going to keep trying to bring evidence to that fact to try and see a change. But I'd encourage everyone, if you feel similarly, to continue to raise your voice, continue to join those of us who are willing to keep fighting for this, because it is worthwhile to keep fighting for, not just for that one ALS patient, but for so many people who many of us probably know and can point to, who know that cannabis has helped them have a better quality of life. And I think that's our obligation to try and help them.
I appreciate your candor. Those of you that know how Trenton works know that we're getting closer every day, winning hearts and minds. But we're getting closer every day because of people like Senator Singleton. And I'm going to say this to you, as somebody I've known for a very, very long time in a lot of different roles, tell Troy Singleton that it can't be done, and you watch it get done. I don't mean to put that on your shoulders, but we're going to help get that done, because I agree with him. This isn't robbing any industry. This isn't robbing any of the revenue out of those mayors' pockets that they're talking about. This is helping sick patients afford their medicine and get access to it, because there's places you can't buy some of these strains that work in a way. So, Senator, thank you for your advocacy on this. I really appreciate it. It's important. Ladies and gentlemen, we're done with the formal program right now with these two amazing guests. We're going to open this up to some questions. A little bit of time. We're going to, same format. You raise your hand. We're going to call on you, and we're going to bring a mic over to you, so we'll wait to that. And Mr. Booker, I see you in the back. Thank you for joining us this morning, sir. How are you? I know you've got that big booming voice, but wait, because I think somebody's going to be headed over to you with a mic. We don't want you to strain your vocal cords in case you have some singing to do later on.
Thank you, Councilor. I want to welcome Chair Wayne and Senator Singleton to this event, and certainly appreciate the advocacy that you have put forward. Senator, you're a hero to a lot of people, and we appreciate what you've done and what you're doing. One of the things that I think is important for all of us in industry to do is to support elected officials and appointed officials who are doing the difficult work and sometimes challenging friends as necessary, right? So, Troy, you be commended for that. Those of us in the industry appreciate your hard work. Dan has done tremendous work. A lot of rumblings out there about folks wanting to change this, change that, mess with the CRC, etc. I don't support that. I think you've done a great job, and you've done hard work in the face of opposition that sometimes isn't always the best intentioned, right? So I'll just leave it at that. But we appreciate what you've done, and thank you for being here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, Lori Carlin. So I'm an energy advisor, and I just wanted to piggyback on what you mentioned about NJ-BAC and the EDA. So for business owners in the room, for those that look to business owners to pay them for their fees, they can save even more money when they build their facilities. There's fabulous rebates and incentives through New Jersey's Clean Energy Program. I represent Facility Solutions Group. It's a national lighting distributor. You need horticultural lighting to do all this. So there's even more monies that are out there, and there's state funds. They're on page 2 of our electric bill. So commercial businesses have paid into them, and New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, lets them use that money towards these cannabis cultivation facilities. People just don't know about it. So happy to help.
It's great, and it goes back to the normalization of this business, right? It's whether you're making widgets or you're making cannabis products. Our federal government has some things to say ultimately about making this more normal, but these are the tools that businesses have to help them be more affordable and more successful, and it's continuing to happen. You're right about the education piece too. Mr. Shell Pace has a question. Oh,
the other Michelle.
Too many Michelles. My apologies, ladies.
Good morning, everyone. Michelle Santos, CEO of Canna Coverage. We provide insurance services, certainly for property and casualty, but also for health benefits. And now that medical marijuana has been legal for more than a decade, and there's a pathway with rescheduling, taking cannabis off Schedule 1 and bringing it to Schedule 3, we have a way to bring medical cannabis to employee health benefits, right? And there's bills that are on the floor. I'm not sure if they carried over into 2024, but for medical cannabis to be reimbursed by the healthcare carriers, but until such time, we can bring medical cannabis as a voluntary benefit. But we certainly welcome the discussion with you, Senator Singleton. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to see you again. So I wholeheartedly agree that there needs to be some advancements in how we treat medical cannabis on the whole. So part of the priorities in explore ways that we can reduce some of the costs for medical cannabis will be to talk with our partners in other state agencies and with healthcare providers and other private sector stakeholders to figure out how medical cannabis can become part of the regular conversation when we're talking about access to medicine and access to healthcare infrastructure. I know there's been some litigation in the last few years that talk about medical cannabis access, especially in workers' compensation contexts, but that is probably an area where I think we're going to see continued advancements, not just here in New Jersey, but nationally, and hopefully it's going to be moving in a positive direction so that people have better, easier access to the things that they need for their medicine.
Just to add, cannabis is a cost saver in a variety of different ways in a medical effort, and we're going to probably get in a little bit more of this in the next panel, but some of the things that need to be unlocked, unfortunately, aren't available here at the state level. They're at the federal level, but once they do, I think there's already been innovation going on in the state level, both through the CRC on the regulatory side, and they have some tools in their toolkit that not only can help with the ability and affordability for patients, but the fantastic research opportunities that exist down the line. And to Senator Singleton's point, they'll use every tool at their disposal that they can. The challenges now are what were available to us and what we're allowed to use. For example, Medicaid dollars, not necessarily available for this purpose yet. We'll see. So I think there's a new frontier coming that we haven't even really opened up yet. But I can tell you that these folks here and their partners in the legislative world and the executive branch, they're ready to tackle that.
Thanks for joining us today. Big fans of your work, as you both know. But I have two questions for you both. One's more of a question, one's a statement. So the first one is, if you're going to tackle pricing, are you looking to be more inclusive with that strategy by actually looking at the real estate, especially on the rec side, mostly? The real estate and the price gouging that has been going on since this has come online in terms of lease rates, purchase rates. It's just kind of been ridiculous in the Hunger Games in our real estate market since cannabis has come online. And I don't see how we can tackle pricing if we can't tackle the pricing of the operational costs, including the real estate, which is one of the largest pieces. The second part of this is great work working with the EDA. I've spent hours in those meetings as well, giving feedback on some of these programs, specifically for minority businesses. But on the heels of the New Jersey disparity study that dealt with government contracts, but it also dispelled this false narrative that I've always felt was a false narrative, that black and brown businesses don't have capacity or business acumen, and it dispelled that. So I feel like a lot of these programs overly emphasize technical assistance as a gate to get us into these programs. And are we going to start looking at programs that are more advantageous to get us actually doing the work versus those who are making us jump through hoops to get to the money, because I really feel as though minority businesses are kind of beat over the head with technical assistance, and this study shows that we have the business acumen and we have the capacity. So our programs can't be so heavily weighted on, if you finish 5 classes, you can get, you know, this dollar amount, or we can help you in this way. I think we need to have things that are more tangible in our business operations that don't have so many hoops on the technical assistance side, and that goes for both public and private sector business programs.
So just first of all, you're absolutely right. Let's start from there. I think as a general rule, and there are exceptions, as a general rule, I think we do sort of lean far too much with the resources we have with all the let's help folks get ready to run, as opposed to saying someone is ready to run and give them the pieces that move forward. As a general rule, I would say that. There is some nuance to that in this space as well, because there are a lot of folks with great entrepreneurial spirit who really need to understand the mechanics of taking that spirit and running a business through a government structure. So there's a balance there. But I do credit the EDA through its Cannabis Equity Grant Program with this joint venture program that they have. That's the $12 million fund that I talked about earlier. They have a $12 and an $8 million fund. That one really helps businesses for their startup and operational costs over a 3-year horizon. That's less about the technical assistance. The $8 million program leans in pretty hard on the technical stuff to make sure we get folks to the starting block to be ready to sprint once they're there. But I think their grant program is really more geared towards those who are saying, you know what, I know how to run a business. I could just use a little bit of capital to make sure I survive in these first 3 years in this space. That's the work they're doing through their joint venture fund. That's about $12 million. And I know when speaking to Tim Sullivan and his incredible team, they're going to ask all of us for more. The legislature, the governor, they're going to ask for more because it's been tangible and they've seen the benefits of it. I would agree with you. Let's double down on that part of it, right? Because there are a lot of businesses who have a great acumen, business know-how. We've created some of the other tools so you can take the deductions and use them the right way. They just need a little bit of that capital to really get them going. So I feel pretty confident that program will address that. That second one is trying to find that right balance. Like, some folks do need that technical know-how, but I agree with you. There's a lot of folks who know how to run a business. They just need the capital to move forward. Lastly, I've heard over and over again about the rent issue and the challenges we've had. We've talked to our friends at the CRC, various commissioners around that. I know it's something that is in their minds on how they can actually structure it, but when it comes to the actual gouging and we get evidence of that, in the few instances that's at least been brought to my attention, on a couple in the 7th District, we've been able to call out bad actors and have bad actors all of a sudden have the backup lease that they didn't know they had. And that other lease was the one that's really more market conditioned and not just conditioned because the product is cannabis. So a lot of times we've had to play the cop around that piece, but we're hopeful we can have a structure where folks understand that they don't need to do that anymore.
Thank you, Nichelle, for those 2 points. I would echo Senator Singleton's sentiments on these concepts and the problems that come about with price gouging and with taking unfair advantage of cannabis business entrepreneurs, because I see it too. We definitely see it. We see applicants who are ready to submit their application to convert from like a conditional license to an annual license. They have a property owner lined up. Once they get to the negotiation table, things are going great, and then when they go to execute a lease, that's when their rent jumps from $5,000 to $15,000 or from $20,000 to $40,000. And so we do see that. As government, our powers to respond to that kind of issue and that kind of problem is limited. However, what I do is make sure that I call, like Senator Singleton noted, we call out bad actors and make sure that everybody understands that everyone in the private sector has a responsibility to help advance equity, and price gouging and taking advantage of cannabis businesses simply because they're working with cannabis takes us in the opposite direction. So I make sure to publicly emphasize that it's not just government that needs to do equity work, it's also every person in the private sector as well, whether you're a lender who is trying to evaluate which investment opportunity you are going to actually put your dollars to, whether you're a landlord looking at how to structure your purchase, your sale agreements or your lease agreements, or you're a supplier, you're just a regular supplier or ancillary business, right? We need people to understand that they too have a responsibility to make sure that we are treating cannabis businesses fairly and just as any other business. And then the last thing I'll say about the technical assistance programs, I definitely hear what you're saying and understand the frustration that sometimes resources perpetuate racial stereotypes and prejudice. And I think that when the CRC engages in those conversations about how do we provide resources, we try to make sure that we underscore to people who are, or to entities that are thinking about putting programming together, that if you want to target your program for technical assistance, make sure you're targeting that based on actual need. If you want to target dollars, make sure you're targeting that on actual need, who actually needs the funding, who actually needs the dollars. It's not just that every Black or brown business owner needs technical assistance. Not every Black and brown business owner needs the capital either, right? So we need to make sure that we are having honest conversations about what gap we're trying to fill and how we are reaching out and providing those resources to people in a way that brings that, recognizes their value and recognizes the strengths that they already come to the table with. And I would invite Penny Wild from the BAC to talk more about the specifics of her program, because I know they are looking at trying to make sure that they are offering great, relatable and understandable, digestible resources for people coming from communities that are most impacted.
And Nichelle, you've been at this table for a long time helping make this better every step of the way, but you know this in two places. Number one, this CRC has put time back on the clock within their regulatory limits for every one of these applicants as they're out there hunting and finding what they can look for. And those three mayors we heard from, they're going to be 30 soon, they're going to be 300 soon, right? And that gives more inventory out there, and that's going to help to some extent. But calling out bad actors is one part of the job, but giving people time to move and work is half the battle too. And this CRC has been unbelievable with applicants in making sure they afford them that time. And the other thing I'll point out, Senator Singleton pointed this out in the beginning, we didn't allow the EDA to be involved. That was a point in this legislation. Colleagues, Senator worked with his colleagues, hearts and minds change. So now you have, well, we should be doing this. You still have some folks, I won't name names, but on the other side of the aisle, we had some folks in this hearing actually, well, why are we giving all this money out there? And by the time that hearing was done, like, why are we giving more money to these folks? So I think EDA is doing brilliant work right now, and you're going to see more and more of this, and there is going to be more of a demand on the senator and his colleagues to fund this engine because people are seeing the results. So it's a process, we're in it, it's all connected. You heard from the mayors, we heard from these fantastic individuals that are making stuff happen at the state level. Interplay with the industry. We're going to hear from our next panel in a minute about what's going on at the federal level. Some of that's not as great, by the way. But what these folks have done and what they continue to do on a day in, day out basis is nothing short of a miracle to make New Jersey the success it is. So please join me in a very warm round of applause. Thank you. Senator and Chairwoman, thank you so much for your time. I know how important it is. We're going to take a very brief break, and we'll be back after with our last panel. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. All right, for our third and final panel that's going to really take a deep dive into the federal issues impacting the cannabis industry and give some timely updates. Bill Caruso, the floor is once again yours.
Thanks, Christina. So we had some shifting sands here as things happen sometimes. And I want to say this to you, sometimes things happen in a good way for a good reason. So my friend Scott Rutter has worn so many different hats, so many relevant hats to this discussion. And I'm fortunate to call him friend because I've sort of grew up with him in this industry and this experiment together. So Scott first served in the most important role, I think, in life as a government staffer. I shared that role with him in a different place at a different time when he worked for Congressman Jim Saxton and really got to learn the ways of the federal government, a much different time, by the way. Scott has had the pleasure or misfortune, depending on how we look at it, of serving in elected office at 2 different levels of government. Served as a mayor and served as a state legislator. Scott is a Republican. You still are?
I'm a Republican.
Okay,
yeah.
so Scott's a Republican. And,
Obviously, right? It's the cannabis industry.
and Scott has been one of the most influential industry leaders in New Jersey, leaning into all the things we've just talked about here, running the Cannabis Business Association, which is the industry organization for cannabis in our state. And so when we want to talk about where we're going and where we've been and perhaps a little bit of the dysfunction at the federal level and how that works, I don't know that you can find a better expert to sit here and have this conversation with. So we're really fortunate today, and I'm really fortunate to kind of spitball with you on some of the things we talk about regularly, but the focus here is going to be what may happen at the federal level, what is going to happen at the federal level, what's been promised at the federal level, and the real world impact here in New Jersey today and tomorrow down the line. And so please join me in a round of applause to welcome my friend Scott Rutter.
Thank you, Bill.
So, and I don't think I read your formal bio, but I will, just real quick. Scott is a partner at Burton Trent Public Affairs, one of our sponsors today. He's the founder and the chair, or we call you El Presidente?
El Presidente.
El Presidente, the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. We got a great conversation ahead of us, and all the things I said to you about Scott, I forgot about your Lockheed Martin experience, and I forgot that, by the way, you were Director of Legislative Affairs for New Jersey Transit.
Director of Legislative Affairs, New Jersey Transit.
Do you want to go back and do that again?
The most pushiest job you could ever find.
I can imagine, I can imagine. So we're going to jump right into, we talked a little bit about, I joked about the dysfunction at the federal level. They can't agree that today's Friday down there right now. But we have heard for years about something called safe banking. You may have heard about this concept too. It's been a piece of legislation that has been kicked around for years now. Okay, this is actually we have history here. I'm talking about this. So, Scott, give me your view here of. I mean, we don't have safe banking done. What would safe banking do for the industry folks that you represent? Mm-hmm. And give me an idea of why we're not getting it done at the federal level.
Well, we're not getting it done at the federal level because of politics, right? I mean, that's the most obvious, right? So you watch any news channel, you're going to hear all the different very partisan positions on every single issue. It's shocking. What's going to happen when we have Safe Banking Act passed or things like that? We heard a lot today about ending stereotypes and stigmas. We heard a lot about that, from an operational perspective when people go into different communities. When the government says that this is a normal business, right? So we're starting to see that here in New Jersey. We're starting to treat things more on a more normal business way. The federal government still doesn't get it. So we have more than 2/3 of the states in the country that have legalized cannabis in one way or another. The United States Chamber of Commerce, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, states attorney generals have all written letters to congressional leadership over the years, and nothing seems to move, right? So nothing seems to really want to move at the federal level. We've been close. We've been close when Republicans were in charge of the House at one point. We were close with the Democrats in charge of the House. But nobody wants to seem to pull that trigger to make this happen because in lots of ways it's politics. Lots of ways it's fundraising, right? So if I can keep this hot potato keep going, then people are going to give me money to either oppose something or support something. So that's the reality of politics. But even though we see some positive changes going on at the federal level, someone mentioned opioids earlier, Michelle did, and we see now with veterans, I'm a veteran as well, having access finally to cannabis without having their VA rights taken away. That was a major milestone that got bipartisan support, but even that took years to get there, right? So even something as common sense as something that's healthier for you than an opioid, something that's going to provide you the relief that you need, and it's legal in your state, but if I take that, I'm going to lose my veterans benefits? It's insane, some of these things that go on, but again, it becomes partisan, and I think even as more states come online, and we're going to start to see that in 2024 and 2025, we're going to see these things start to happen again. That's when it'll finally happen, I think. We just need to get a little bit more support behind this, a little bit better understanding what cannabis is and is not, what the drug is and not what we fear it to be. And we're seeing that at the local level. A lot of mayors who, when we passed a referendum back in 2020, they've come around. So when the first number of towns that had said yes, they opted in, it was about 30%. So 70% of the towns opted out. We saw that same number in Colorado when they did it back in 2012. So as we grow, we make cannabis more of a normalized business. We're normalized for use, for patients, for adult consumers. Then we'll start to see hearts and minds change at the federal level.
Do you think safe banking is dead?
No. It's 2024. We have a presidential election. We have very tight margin at the House, very tight margin at the Senate. I don't think we're going to get anything like that passed.
So
Not this year.
One of the criticisms has been safe banking. So on the conservative side, you see different issues about we shouldn't allow this, right? It's still legal in several states. On the again, being stereotypical on the liberal side, we've said this isn't helping enough on the social equity side. Right. Jersey, we just had a whole conversation about what we're doing there. So safe banking, we don't have safe banking, but why can't a dispensary owner, you are one, you're a pending one.
Right.
So tell me about your experience of going into the bank to get a loan to get your business started.
So it's very challenging right now. So we're talking about the businesses opening up and how can we reduce costs? Well, we start to reduce costs by having more competition. The problem is right now, and it's been touched on, is access to funds. How do I open up my business? I want to be a cultivator, even a small cultivator is spending millions of dollars. So we all need to bank. Every cannabis business in New Jersey does bank. People bank with these smaller banks and credit unions. But access to capital is a big challenge for everybody. Banks and credit unions are now starting to slowly get into the loan business. So we're seeing that for operational loans. Usually it's for purchase of property loans or equipment. There's REITs out there that are providing opportunities for folks. There's private funds out there. A lot of those private funds, though, they come with very high interest rates. So you really want to, I always advise people, you really want to go at this in a very smart way. You really want to go at this, access to capital. You don't want to give up your dream to a high interest rate. So it really is for a lot of folks getting really clever on how they're pulling their team together and how they are raising their funds. And a lot of it's going to come down to the business plan, how they present themselves. But every business that's a startup business, cannabis or otherwise, is a risky investment, right? So to take cannabis out of it and just say, hey, I'm a startup, I've never operated a business before, trust me, you give me your money and I'll go make your money back for you, right? Any business, that's going to be hard to raise money. And with cannabis being illegal at the federal level, there's a lot of hesitancy when there's uncertainty, and that's what investors want. They want certainty.
One of the other challenges too, which is a necessary challenge, is these deals have to ultimately get approved by our regulator. And the regulator is policing these deals to make sure they're not usury in nature and protecting the applicants so they're not getting taken advantage of. Would you say that if safe banking passed today in a state like New Jersey, I understand there's challenges around, would be a plus or minus?
An absolute plus.
Gasoline in the engine then for the model we built?
Yep, absolute plus, because that gives more people more access to capital. The banks, the bigger banks, the Bank of America, TD Banks, and Wells Fargo, they're not in this industry. They don't want to be, and I don't blame them either from a model perspective. So from their business model, they take a little bit of money here in a very high-risk industry, and they have billions of dollars over here in more normalized businesses. It's a scary thing to think about what happens. I have to go through some audit because some bad actor is banking with me. Now I have to do this major audit. It'll really slow down these major banks. So I get why they're not doing it. And I also get why these smaller banks are, because it's risk and reward. So they want to take that risk. They want to bank cannabis in New Jersey because it is going to be, as Diana Wayne was saying yesterday at the hearing, $1 billion industry. We're going to be $1 billion industry in 2024. That is super exciting. And so these smaller banks, these credit unions are really creeping back in and getting into this space, and they're taking that risk. And what they're finding is they got great businesses. They have normal businesses that are operating just like anyone else.
So the next scenario I'm going to throw at you, I have a better chance of sprouting wings and flying back to my office when we're done. But let's say that the House and Senate and the President get together this afternoon and agree that they're going to legalize cannabis on the federal level and remove all the restrictions. Good or bad?
Depends.
Okay.
Right? So it depends, and that's going to be really interesting to see. So notionally, like, oh man, this would be amazing. Well, if you're in the Northeast, the weather is cold as it is right now. You're not growing crops outside. Our energy prices are higher than most of the country, at least from the South. And if you're going to grow cannabis in New Jersey, you're going to want to be indoors, right? For the most part. I mean, there's going to be some outdoor grows here and there that are going to pop up. There's going to be some greenhouses that pop up, but for the most part, it's going to be energy intensive, very expensive. And so if we open up the floodgates and now we're importing weed from California, well, California could cripple our market in a second by dumping a bunch of weed that they grow outdoors with very unregulated market, using the sunshine for their energy, and it could really cripple it. So how we evolve as a state and state by state will be interesting to see. I think we're going to be feeling this debate and discussion about how we should be acting as a state. Do we want to allow imports, right? So I know years ago, Coors beer could not travel across certain state lines. We couldn't import wine into New Jersey as an individual until early 2000s. So we've had restrictions on various things in the past, not just New Jersey, but states. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know those who have spent tens of millions of dollars building out cultivation facilities would be really put out by the fact that they're going to have all this cheap weed coming across state lines. And so what does that mean? So patients will benefit, adult consumers will benefit for lower prices, but a lot of folks who took the risk to invest in this industry are going to suffer. So how this evolves, what that debate's going to be, I don't know if you're going to be here, if I'm going to be here when this debate happens. The legislators, Diana, there's going to be a whole bunch of different change over the next 5 years, and different people are going to be in different capacities. And that's when that debate's going to happen, I think, in about 5 years on what the state's going to be. I know the unions are going to be interested in being part of that discussion because they could be out of jobs. All these unionized jobs in cultivation, manufacturing facilities, they're going to suffer if we do this. So we have to see. There's going to be a lot of very interested people to be sitting at the table deciding about what the state should or should not do.
So would you say that the lack of action and the dysfunction perhaps at the federal level is actually advantaging New Jersey right now?
Yes. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for dysfunction in Congress?
And thank you, Pennsylvania.
Amen.
So
Amen.
Pennsylvania can't seem to get their act together too. For those of us who are operating in South Jersey, we're very excited about their dysfunction as well.
So let's dig in there for a second, though, because the lack of a federal law and the lack of an adjacent state adopting legalized adult use, they have medical, you're opening on the border. What does that mean for your business?
So for me, I'm opening up Township Green, Riverside, townshipgreen.com. You can look it up.
Excellent.
No, we're opening up in Riverside, New Jersey, so not too far from here. If you look at the map, we're right across the river from Pennsylvania. So our business model and our business plan is not just for obviously Riverside and the local communities surrounding Riverside, but also how can we attract Pennsylvania consumers to come over the bridge and get legalized adult use cannabis.
So let me ask you, do you put billboards up on the New Jersey side to advertise?
No, not yet. We're not allowed to do that just yet. But we're talking about it.
But you do put billboards up on the Pennsylvania
yes,
side.
Yes, there are cannabis businesses in New Jersey that have billboards on the Pennsylvania side. And I'm going to take this as a moment to digress. But that is one of the things we'll be talking about this year is how smaller businesses who are starting up, how they can compete with the already established businesses, right? So the already established businesses have thousands of customers. They have loyalty points. They got you there. So if every time I go to Curaleaf, I can use my loyalty points and I can save a little bit of money and so forth and so on because they've been here for years. So the startups need the opportunity to promote themselves to attract customers to their locations. And so changes in some of the regulations, including advertising, is one of the things we'll be advocating this year.
So let's dive in a minute to the industry that exists here in New Jersey and it's continuing to grow. And we've heard a little bit about supply chain. There's general supply chain issues in the economy that I think are being alleviated in the general economy. But as regard to cannabis, right? We produce it, we grow it. It's all here contained in New Jersey. We understand what federal efforts might entail and potentially hurt our industry. But give me an example here of how a retailer is going to acquire the product diversity that they want on their shelves in this state right now.
So there are limited options, but there is a decent amount of supply, right? So those who are starting up, with those who are already operational, we call them MSOs, or the first 12, and now there's more and more cultivations been approved, even approved yesterday. They're slowly coming online. That's going to be, I think, really exciting for people. I think once they start to see more of a diverse product portfolio out there, they're going to see different price points as well, just like wine. You could buy a $10 bottle of wine, a $20 bottle of wine, a $200 bottle of wine. We're going to see things like that in cannabis as well. It's going to be quality. It's going to dictate a lot of things, and you're going to want to see, most of our communities that have cannabis dispensaries, diverse communities that have cannabis dispensaries, you want that big product portfolio, right? So you want to have the more affordable prices for those who need their medicine, and you want to make sure that the price points are affordable for them. And at the same time, you're going to have some higher end consumers similar to beer and wine that are going to want that premium product, and we're going to see a price point that changes. But the more cultivators that come online, the more manufacturers come online, that the competition creates all these wonderful things. Competition creates reduced pricing, right? So I got to compete with my other guy. It also increases quality. The only reason my product is moving is because of the quality of how I manufactured something or what have you. So quality is going to be impacted in a very positive way, and prices are going to go down in a very positive way as well, because we're going to have more diverse portfolio of products.
Do you see specialization in retailers where you'll see, you mentioned the wine, you have a wine store, you have a liquor store. Do you see different retailers specializing in just different products in general?
100%, because that's how they're going to distinguish themselves, right? So beverages are going to be coming online this year. I think that's one of those things where you're going to see dispensaries like me. I want to have a large cross-section of beverages, and so I'm going to promote myself as a destination location. I think other people are going to do different things for various reasons, and they're going to specialize and start to distinguish themselves. You're going to see, again, displays, partnerships with brands that are going to start to take over certain dispensaries because the brand's going to have a special deal with that particular dispensary. So, and then, I've one of my favorite brands is 1906. It's a very simple product. It's very easily understood, and the consistency and the quality is there. I'm going to want to have a lot of 1906 products because I know that my consumers are going to want to have that consistency every time. And that's also the challenge with cannabis, because cannabis impacts everybody differently. So even though it impacts me this way, it'll impact you slightly different because you smoke a lot more weed than I do.
No comment.
No. But you know what I'm saying. So I think consistency and consumer discretion on what they're going to want is really going to drive how people are going to form themselves and market themselves to different groups of people.
So driving in here, I drove by a store that had an interesting name on it, which I won't mention. And as I got closer to the storefront, I realized it was a convenience store that also sold things called Kratom and CBD and Delta 8 and Delta 9. I don't know if we got into Delta 10 yet. Yeah. And this is an example, I think, of where the federal government did do something, right? We legalized cannabis's boring cousin, hemp. But, never let the innovators stop innovating. We've had folks that have created synthetic THC that is now sold legally in this market. Talk to me a little bit about that and what it's done, and maybe some of the challenges around dealing with it in the regulated market.
Right. So government did a good job. They passed hemp in the Farm Bill. Great thing. Hemp is an amazing product. It is good for your health. It is good for construction products. It's going to be a big part of the bioplastic industry. So there's a lot of wonderful things with hemp, and they define hemp as having THC at 0.03 or less, because hemp and cannabis are the same thing. Essentially, it's just how much THC is in there, and that's how it gets regulated. Very clever people. I'm not at all happy with this scenario when I say very clever people, but very clever people said, okay, cool. We can create Delta 8 products. Delta 8 is not in that bill. It's not listed as something that you can't do in that Farm Bill. And what very clever people did is they took Delta 8. Now, Delta 8, when it first started popping up on shelves, people were referring to it as, well, it's like CBD and you get a little buzz, right? So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, while Delta 8 does exist in nature, it's in such a minute amount that it requires a synthetic additive to it. So when we're ingesting Delta 8, whether it's a gummy or a vape pen, you have no idea what you're actually doing. And if we recall the vape crisis in 2019, and this was a nicotine-based vape crisis, Some dudes out in California, they added vitamin E acetate to their big barrels, and they put all this stuff in these nicotine pens, and they were distributed across the country, and dozens of people died. Thousands of people were injured, permanently injured as well. It was an awful thing because it was some additives and some dudes, and they thought it was going to be okay, and it wasn't. And I think that's exactly what the Delta 8 market is right now. One of the things that we did with my New Jersey Cannabis Business Association is we went and grabbed in South Jersey and in North Jersey 4 different vape pens, Cannabis Delta 8 vape pens that are at convenience stores. And we took them to a licensed cannabis lab, and we had them do this analysis. And the ingredients and by the way, these packages, you go to these places, it looks all legit. They're beautiful packaging. It gets shipped in from China. It just says what it says, and some dude puts a vape card in there, and it never matches the box. So it has barcodes, has certificate of authenticity, and all these wonderful things. And you look at it like a website, and like, oh, this is great. Well, you're not going back home and looking at the website. You're not doing an analysis, so we did that for you. And we took 4 different pens, and the ingredients in there had high levels of Delta 8, Delta 9, which high levels of Delta 9 would make that product right now illegal, Delta 10, other types of elements that were not even in the testing equipment that they couldn't even test for. But it was none of the things that were in that package matched the box. So that comfort that you have of this beautiful package and it's at a convenience store, so it must be legal, is false. And so people ask, like, so what can the state do? What can municipalities do? You know, that's a challenge that the legislature is taking on right now with regard to how should we look at Delta 8 products, regulate them, how should it be regulated, what are the processes for growing, selling, and all that stuff. So that'll be a debate this year.
What would you do? You were a former legislator. You've been in the middle of this. This isn't regulated right now by the CRC. This is, by the way, not being carded, and children are getting a hold of it.
Yep.
Tell me, what would you do?
So as a mayor, not as a legislator.
Fair enough.
Right? So as a mayor, if I knew this and I have the authority to do this, or the police have the authority to do it, to grab something, test it, and if it has high levels of THC, then that has to be confiscated from the shelves. I wouldn't want necessarily people who are selling these Delta 8 products at convenience stores and gas stations to be criminals all of a sudden. Okay. Right? Because it's, they think they're doing okay. I don't know the mindset of everybody, but I've talked to some honest brokers who are selling Delta 8, Delta 9 products, hemp derived, and they have rules like you have to be 21 and older to get in. They try and follow the regulated market rules, which I respect that they're trying to do that, but they also don't know what's in their products. So as a mayor, that's one of the things I could do locally. I had a meeting last week with a dozen or so health officials in the state, so the county, health, director and the medical director from Elizabeth and places like that. And so this was the conversation. That was their chief concern, because kids are getting access to this. You can walk into these convenience stores and gas stations, and a 15-year-old can buy it. And that was the big story here in South Jersey. Some kid was passed out stoned on a Delta 8 product that he got at a convenience store. 15-year-old kid. That's a scary, scary proposition for anybody, any parent, to see that. So I do know that the local municipalities have the authority to confiscate illegal drugs, and most of that stuff in these places would be considered illegal drugs by any standard.
Switch gears for a second. There's some innovative things coming down the pike, and I want to touch on these at the state level before we get back into the federal discussion. 2 different license classes now are coming. One on the sort of retail attachment, this idea of a consumption lounge. Mm-hmm. And then the other, we talked a little bit more about retailers like you and producers and manufacturers connecting. We're going to have a wholesale license coming soon. So give me an idea from your end of what you anticipate coming in both the consumption lounge space and also on the wholesaler space, and how that's going to work.
So the idea of consumption lounge has been around for a long time, and I think people are struggling to figure out what it really means to them, to their community. I view it, it was actually born, so the consumption lounge idea was actually born for a well-meaning idea, which is those folks who are patients and adult consumers now. This idea started a while ago, but patients and adult consumers who live in federally subsidized housing, if they're caught smoking weed, even if they're a patient, they could lose their housing. So well, how do we deal with this? And so the idea was sort of born was, well, let's have a consumption lounge. Let's have a safe place for people to medicate. And then as the conversation continued and we moved into the adult use world, what would it look like? And how would, these businesses who provide these spaces make money? And so the conversation shifts between folks who are interested in being in this space. Do you want it to be something where people show up at 12 o'clock all day long and you can just smoke weed? Do you want it to be an event space that's opened up only on the weekends? An opportunity for product launches and other types of things. So people are looking at this a little differently than just a bar that you smoke weed at. It's just, how can I make this something that's more profitable, something that's more welcoming? Also making sure, and it's in the regs, that we are accommodating patients, that we're achieving our original mission. I mean, the thing is about cannabis, and we always said this, Diana, Bill, and I, and others, we crisscrossed the state of New Jersey for years, advocating for legalization. And one of the things we always started with is that cannabis is a medicine first. So even if you're doing it for fun, it is a medicine first. In fact, at the federal level, no THC-derived drug has ever been legalized up until Epidiolex. So Epidiolex is approved by the FDA. It's a cannabis-derived medicine, and it was such a struggle to get this done because there's a rare condition, a seizure disorder called Dravet syndrome. Kids who have Dravet syndrome will have 100, 200 seizures a day. There is no pharmaceutical drug ever created that is dealing with that can solve that challenge. And so finally the FDA conceded and allowed a company called GW Pharmaceuticals to move forward with their program. So because it's federally illegal, we couldn't do the research in the United States. The research had to be done in England. And then they transferred that data to the University of Maryland. And the University of Maryland is walking paper through the FDA trying to get these approvals. I mean, that was such a ridiculous scenario, but we did get this thing done. And it does show that at some point the federal government does recognize this need. And you have to understand from the beginning that cannabis is a medicine first.
You have, actually. You started this journey when you first came out of government, lifting up our friend Rob Cresson. Mm-hmm. And digging in on the medical side. Before I get into the final part of this, give me your views on the home grow piece. You heard Senator Singleton speak so eloquently about his effort. You're in this industry. You represent this industry. Is home grow a threat to this industry?
Not at all. And that's the biggest misnomer is that, you look at Colorado. So when we were going on the advocacy side and legalization discussions, we always looked at Colorado as a model, like, how much money will New Jersey make and all these other things. Colorado has a population of 5.5 million people. They have about 80 million visitors. We're a little over 9 million people. We have about 110 million visitors. They did 1.8 billion. They're approaching 2 billion annually. And they have the most prolific outdoor grow, home grow, everybody can grow program in the country. And we're going to be passing them naturally. So it will not impact. Home grow for patients especially, it needs to happen, it has to happen. The price points are going to be too high for too long for lots of folks. It is absolutely time for that. And that Dravet syndrome scenario I mentioned earlier, I met this is a number of years ago, I met this beautiful little girl and her dad. She suffered from Dravet syndrome. She was 10 years old at the time. And he just, with such passion is telling me what he has to do illegally to get his daughter the medicine that she needs. He was an x-ray technician. He's not making a ton of money, single dad, and he had to risk his freedom so he could take care of his baby girl. And that's where I stand.
Thank you. I'm going to end with some hope. We talked about where perhaps the federal government's been dysfunctional. We talked about where the potential hiccups could come or disasters could come if the federal government moves too fast, too far. Let's talk about the incremental change. The elephant in the room right now is this discussion about rescheduling. And I want to say something, folks, our Jersey friends. There's two Jersey people involved in this. Our former Attorney General, Ann Milgram, who's the head of the DEA, is literally the decider right now on what's going to happen next. And a good friend of mine who used to work as chief of Clapper is involved in this discussion. Jersey's involved in everything that's good, by the way. So what's happening right now is a conversation going on about something called rescheduling. And I guess what I want to talk to you about is We are the most highly educated workforce in the nation. I'll take that liberty.
Yeah.
We have manufacturing roots. We have farmer roots. We have, what is rescheduling? And if we're fearful of a open door policy that might flood the market, what does rescheduling do potentially to lift up medical and lift up research here in New Jersey?
First of all, there's been a long-standing, interesting relationship between cannabis legalization advocates and pharmaceutical companies, and it hasn't always been great.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you saw Big Pharma coming in and running campaigns against legalization because they view cannabis as the threat that it is. It is a threat. It's a very disruptive technology when you can grow your own medicine at your own house. It's a scary thing for lots of folks. That being said, medical research into cannabis is so necessary to pinpoint how cannabis sells. You see this in Israel and the Netherlands and these other countries, and they've done a lot of research on the medical side. And we see in other countries the results of cannabis killing cancer cells, cannabis providing these types of relief. And to be able to get this plant and put it in a format, in a formula that'll have that exact same effect all the time, that is one of the big challenges that the cannabis industry has, and it's because of our limited amount of ability to do this type of research. So I view it as something to look at with some level of optimism and caution. The optimism is, it's going from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. Schedule 1, if you don't know, is the worst of the worst. Heroin is up there. Schedule 2's got cocaine. Like, cannabis is worse than cocaine by the federal schedule. So we all recognize the fact that it's kind of silly, it's not that bad, and all that wonderful thing. So if we make it a Schedule 3, which is the discussion, and the FDA has signed off on it, it's now in the hands of the DEA. The DEA has never gone against the will of the FDA. So whatever's going on right now internally is a process. But once that happens, I think we'll see more banks getting involved. The tax issue starting to be resolved. So those types of things on the business side, I think will be good, because on the research side, I am excited. Manufacturing is a big deal in New Jersey. Pharmaceutical companies are a big deal in New Jersey. We have this phenomenal workforce, as you mentioned. I think it will be exciting, but I look at it again, a little bit caution. We need to keep an eye on these things to make sure that all the goodness that can come from that actually happens, and not some sort of grab of an industry by another industry.
Last piece I'll pin you down on. You were there. We did some amazing work together at the legislative level of really lifting up our research universities here in the state. You just indicated that we're doing fantastic research offshore right now in Israel and other places. I look at, in our region alone, Rowan, Rutgers-Camden, Cooper, Inspira, Virtua, Deborah. We have fantastic, we've got across the river Jefferson, who has boots on the ground here, Nemours Children's Hospital, CHOP. What do you foresee down the line? And you're going to be on a retail adult use side, but the ability to partner with these fantastic research centers to develop stuff that we don't even know exists right now.
Right.
What do you see coming down the line in that respect?
No, that's what I see. There will be collaboration necessarily. There will be an amazing amount of collaboration, and there's also competition. I mean, there's competition in the healthcare system as it stands right now. Every time you see a Cooper popping up, you see a Virtua popping up in South Jersey. It's good for growth. It's good for the real estate industry. Cannabis is going to be that unique thing. So right now, for example, there are products out there that are like Rick Simpson oil. For those who are familiar with Rick Simpson oil, this dude, Rick Simpson, in the 1970s had cancer. He created this oil. He gave this, it helped cure his cancer, and he's alive today. And this is something that's he puts online for places, for people to create their own Rick Simpson oil. You can also buy it off the shelf right now. I look at a product like that, and if you could put something like that in a pill where people are more comfortable taking, and you're going to have that same exact effect, I do think that's going to be a big, huge game changer. We're not smoking weed in the delivery room. We're not smoking weed in the cancer corridors. That's not what's going to happen, but having a product that is safe and effective and consistent is going to be a huge game changer for sure.
Last piece, and we're going to go to questions. So we potentially have the risk of losing cultivation ultimately as that moves offshore or moves to different climates.
Right.
What happens with manufacturing jobs?
Well, that's the thing. So I am concerned about the longevity of cultivation in New Jersey, and I don't know when that is. I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or may never be. It may be this craft cultivation, and it's going to be thriving. So the evolution is going to be what it's going to be. But manufacturing products, wherever you source your cannabis flower or your oil, the manufacturing of products and having your distinctive brands out there is very exciting. I think so. Manufacturing, is a great place to be right now. Dispensary operators like myself, knock on wood, next month, we'll have all these different products to sell, and a more diverse set and more consistent, the higher quality, the better off we're all going to be. But I think manufacturing is here to stay. Clearly, a place where people can purchase their products is here to stay. Cultivation has got a lifespan, and I think that what I hear a lot of cultivators talk about is craft cultivation. I think you hear a lot more about that, just like we're seeing with our breweries in New Jersey. So we're going to start to see more craft cultivators.
All right, so I snuck ahead of the questions, so I got mine in first, but you are all invited to ask some too. Listen, I learn something every time I talk to you, and I thank you for your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have questions, a round of applause for this young man. Thank you. With all the hats he wears, please indulge him in some questions. If you have some, we have some time for you right now. Yes, sir. We're going to wait. You're going to get a mic. Alex, thank you.
Yes, Scott, thank you so much. Just touching on what you were just talking about with, forecasting the future. Do you see dispensaries in New Jersey kind of being like what the licenses are now, which is like, do you see cannabis being in the big boxes, like a Target or whatnot? Are you fighting to protect the small business owners that are putting a lot of time, energy, and resources out into building these shops?
Yeah, I have my thought process is this. I'm generally speaking a free market guy, that it's generally speaking, that's just been my background, Republican, all that great stuff. This is a very regulated industry, and the cost of opening up any of these licenses, right? So dispensary, cultivation, manufacturing, the cost is so prohibitive for many that I want to have these folks have the opportunity to succeed, right? So we wouldn't want a proliferation and weed being sold in Rite Aids and Targets and so forth, right? We would want it to be in a regulated space, and I go and I look at this from an investment perspective, right? So all these folks who followed the rules, they went through the CRC process, they're living through the state laws and regulations, and give these folks the opportunity to succeed is definitely what we need to be doing, for sure.
Question about one of the pieces of the puzzle here. One of the holdups is capital, right? Another is real estate. So on the real estate topic, could you walk us through, and you're both involved, and you know which townships are thinking about it, you're lobbying, you're getting them to open up to this industry. How does that part of the sausage making work in terms of, hey, we've identified, like the mayor had this area that 5 locations are opening up. Great. Most townships have a centralized place where the commercial activity is happening. How do you get to the point where you're identifying the right properties and getting those people to actually either lease or sell so that cannabis can be operated on? Because a lot of landlords don't want to deal with the cannabis industry because they don't understand it, the typical issues that happen there.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you what my experience is on this. It varies greatly. And I think you heard this from mayors. So number one, inventory, right? Mayor Vesey told you they put a zone together, and because of federal or lack of federal law, a significant amount of the available real estate isn't available, right? I've had conversations with large real estate clients that just don't want to be in the space right now. So I think rescheduling absolutely helps that, because it takes some of the sting away from this and allows us in a better place. But it also helps on the municipal level. We have had conversations with municipalities that aren't there yet, and the reluctance is it's illegal at the federal level. There's a fear of sorts, and I understand that. And you're not going to change that. You can sit there and talk all day long. You can show them the money. They're hung up on the fact federal government says this is a bad thing. This is Schedule 1, as Scott said. This is worse than cocaine, right? According to so. You do need that external validation that occurs, and I think rescheduling, as this normalizes, and you see this, right? I mean, when we first started talking about this, people were like, look at this weirdo talking about cannabis. Now we're here talking about it in a business sense. We have the EDA involved. We have the, businesses and banks and insurance companies. This is real. And so I think the more we go down these paths and fix these levers, and I think Scott was right, though, that we want to do this smart. We don't want to just open a floodgate here that then allows for all of this innovation to just be flushed down the drain, and we don't have this look like what it was intended. I mean, with all due respect to big box retail, there's a lot of that right now. But this is different. This is more craft. This is more focused. This is small business oriented. So there's the incremental change, as some people are frustrated by incremental change, it's probably good in this space, but it's all happening too. Like the idea of rescheduling is a reality. The conversation's going on right now, which I'm sure you're part of, and this gentleman is certainly clearly a part of, I'm sure. He's trying to drown me out to tell me that he doesn't want me to tell you the secret, right? But they're talking about the President's State of the Union speech is coming up in March. There's some rumors going on now that we may have rescheduling before then. There's a campaign coming up in November, so there's some effort there. I've heard more likely this is something coming in the summer, but we're hearing it's happening. So rescheduling is a game changer of sorts that's going to fix a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that, and create new research opportunities, going to bring new people into this game that you may see municipalities looking at. I mean, Mayor, who talked to you earlier, he may look at this and go, well, wait a minute, I want to use that Nike base for medical research now. That's incredible. I didn't even know that existed. So this is an ever-evolving space.
And I think, too, everybody's doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing this for the first time. So that's why you saw 3 different approaches from these 3 different mayors, because they did it for the very first time. And I think the towns that are going to come online hereafter are going to learn from that. And as I say to mayors, because a lot of mayors are like, hey, I want to have as many as I can because, dispensaries or whatever, because I want to make a ton of money. It's like, well, you're not. All you've done is diluted the amount of money that these businesses are making. And so the tax benefit to your town is going to be about the same, whether you have 2, 4, or 7. It doesn't really matter. There's only so much, of a base there within a community. So why not have it more of a smarter approach and have 1 or 2 allow these folks to continue to expand and create jobs, and then the township gets the money. These people can now, start writing their own grants to the communities. Maybe something, a playground needs to be fixed, and they can now contribute to that because they have the ability to do that. So I think towns are going to slowly come online, and they're going to, when they start to see that the sky didn't fall, the boogeyman doesn't smoke weed out front, and it'll be fine.
The revenue helps too.
Money helps.
Hi. Might be off base, but it just drew to mind with you talking about the classifications. Now, medicinally, I completely appreciate some of the stronger cannabis being needed, but is there going to be any, or I would imagine it has been, but it does not seem to be much regulation talk. I see a lot of talk about legalization and towns embracing it, but what about the regulation of the strength of this cannabis that just seems to be increasing and increasing? And I do feel personally it is a safety issue because these are drivers on the road. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like an old lady, and I'm sorry, I know we're at a cannabis event, but I think, when I'm driving down the road and all I'm smelling is pot, but if I was driving down with a bottle of vodka, if it's a strong cannabis, what regulation or what are these townships doing to make sure that the communities are safe?
So a couple thoughts on there, right? So we heard during the legalization debates and discussions that this isn't your father's marijuana and that the THC is higher than it's ever been. And I would argue, or I would agree, it is. It's also the lowest it's ever been. When you have a regulated market, you can create products that go this way or that way. And I think patients know this more than your adult consumer right now, but there's so many other things in the cannabis plant, different cannabinoids, flavonoids that really are beneficial to you that will give you an experience if you want to be high or you're medicating, whatever the case might be. There are so many other things in there more worthwhile than the THC level. That being said, it's relatively new. And when we look at equivalency in the liquor market, we know that 12 ounces of beer, It's going to have a different impact than 12 ounces of wine, which will have a different impact than 12 ounces of whiskey. And I've done that in one night, and I will tell you, it's not a good thing. So, the answer to your question is, it really will come down to, we look at different studies, Colorado, Washington especially, what was the impact on traffic fatalities? And one of the things that we're seeing, like the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice, they did a recent survey, or a study rather, and what they find is traffic fatalities have actually gone down in Colorado. So it's not something where we're seeing this massive impact like you might expect. Really, the reality is people who are cannabis consumers are very responsible people, and they pretty much smoke at home. So it's not like it's a big thing.
And I'm going to call upon our former panelist and guest, Chairwoman Wainu, who also can weigh in on what the CRC's done. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I do appreciate the fact that there are still concerns about safety and about potency and about product packaging and how we make sure that individuals are using cannabis safely. So at the state level, our regulations and also state law, it's written into the statute, there is a limit on the amount of THC that can be included in a manufactured product. And also, so no more than 100 milligrams of THC in any product. And going even further, no more than 10 milligrams of THC is permitted in any individual serving size. So if you have, for example, a jar of gummies, and the serving size for the gummy is one gummy, that one gummy can have no more than 10 milligrams of THC, and there can be no more than 100 milligrams of THC in that entire package. It is really important for our consumers to understand what cannabis does for them and to take things slowly. So we have a public awareness campaign, Cannabis Smart, Cannabis Safe, to encourage people that they really should be reading the instructions on the package of their products that they're purchasing, so that they are not consuming too much cannabis, right? We want to make sure that people understand that they have a responsibility. If you're going to consume cannabis, you need to do it safely. You need to stay off of the roads and keep people safe. And we want to encourage people to do that by making sure that they understand the dosage that is written on the cannabis product packages that they're buying, and that they are not overindulging. Yes, I know that I am somebody who cannot manage to eat just one cookie, but if one cookie, it really is the serving size, because that one cookie has 10 milligrams of THC, it is my responsibility to only eat the one and stay off of the roads.
Thank you. That was a really good question. I really appreciate it. Michelle, we have you, and if we have time, we'll go one more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No worries. Thanks for explaining that
Yeah,
in detail. But this is for both of you, actually. When you talked about the advertising, do you have people in the industry? I'm just going to shamelessly plug, I've been in advertising for 30 years. In 2018, before you were doing a lot of the work that you were doing now, we held a panel in Princeton, New Jersey, advertisers, about the elevation of the cannabis industry. I also invite you all to visit, in terms of consumer experience, I also invite you all to visit Camden Apothecary. That's something my agency designed. It's a different customer experience, more modeled like California. It's not coddling people in ropes. It's not over-policing them, securing them. They can walk around, they can sit in lounges if they want. There's a bud bar where they can actually smell the cannabis inside of a container, and have a nice experience. But I would love to talk with you all offline about the regulations for advertising, because I've worked in all regulated substances, pharma, RX, OTC, I had NyQuil, DayQuil, you name it. I've launched about 10 different alcohol products, liquor brands. Now cannabis is on the forefront, and I started doing that work back in 2018. So I would like to get more information on what those rules and regulations are. And do you have people actually from the advertising and marketing industry that have years of experience in regulated consumer products on that initiative as well?
Can can I jump in here? I'm gonna put you to work.
Sure.
And I know I can.
Ask me any question you like.
So one of the problems that we have, and we saw this in the last panel, is the challenge between what is a regulatory issue, and these folks have done yeoman's work in working around the regulatory issues and readapting, and what's statutory. And a lot of what was in the law was back in time, the reefer madness world, right? But this is bad, and we got to keep it away from kids, and we should, right? But we can't tell people that this exists, right? It can't be on a billboard, can't be in a magazine, can't be certainly on your television. So I think this is where our regulators and our industry need help from the legislature. And there's work going on right now, and I'll reach out to you offline, because you as an advertiser, you're part of this discussion, you're part of this industry. You were what was intended when we said there's gonna be 1,000 points of light growing here. It's not just selling cannabis in a store, it's not just growing it, it's not just manufacturing, it's all of it. It's the insurance service, it's the pest control service, it's the lawyers and the engineers and the advertising, all the ancillary. The membership of this organization is going to benefit from, but we got to keep working. So let's talk, because there's some work ahead of us, I think, this year that can help out this commission, help out this industry, and help out your industry get to the right place here now. So
Yeah, let's definitely talk, because like I said, I've done all of them, even tobacco, so you name the regulated substance, I know how to maneuver the regulations.
Just, and I'll add this. This is, and I've had this conversation with the chairwoman as well and legislators. This is a great year. This is 2024, right? This is the great opportunity to do and fix some of these things. A lot of the rules and regulations we have right now are there based on our concerns that we heard from the mayors and chiefs of police, the moms and dads about this and that and the other thing. And now we've seen, it's like, hey, it didn't happen. It's actually great, and these are great community partners. So I think we're going to see this year, 2024, a lot of these restrictions being released.
thank you. This was
Yes, sir.
awesome. Thank you all for being here today, for participating in this. Scott, thank you for your time. Thanks, everybody.